OTB's The Hurling Pod.
With Board Gosh Energy.
Hurling. It's anyone's game.
It is quarter-final weekend. It's a doubleheader at the Gaelic Grounds this coming Saturday evening. It's going to be a 4 o'clock start for the first of a doubleheader. Clare, pretty much their second home in Limerick this season, will go up against Dublin. And then at 6:15, we've got the meeting of Galway against Tipperary. All that to look forward to. We'll also be looking back on the weekend just gone by, where Tipperary racked up the biggest score in All-Ireland Hurling history. Seamus Callanan scoring his 40th goal in Championship as Liam Cahill's side ran out 32-point winners against Offaly. Dublin outscored the Joe McDonagh Cup winners Carlow by 1-6 to a point in the last 8 minutes to seal their All-Ireland quarter-final against Clare this coming Saturday. And Limerick will be without their captain Declan Hannon for the upcoming All-Ireland semi-finals. He's out with a knee injury and he's a major doubt for the All-Ireland final should Limerick reach that as well. Delighted to say, James Skehill, Paul Murphy here with me as always. How you getting on, lads?
How's it going, lads?
Good, how are you?
First question, Paul. Gaelic Grounds, sensible decision this afternoon for that doubleheader?
Yeah, I think so. Just the logistics for Páirc Uí Chaoimh, like granted, I can completely understand the Corkonians and Páirc Uí Chaoimh wanting a game down there. But if it is to be a double header, I think logistically it's probably a tough place to get in and out of. Not to mind the long distance, let's say the likes of Galway and Dublin have to travel as well. Probably not a whole lot better for Dublin in terms of distance wise. But no, I think it is. I think the Gaelic Grounds is just a bit more suitable for a double header.
Yeah, what do you reckon, James? I mean, on the one hand, this seems quite tough on Dublin to have to go all the way across to the West Coast to play. The other option, I guess, would have been to maybe play this in Portlaoise or in Nolan Park, but then you wouldn't have had the double header, which probably suits the TV coverage as well.
Yeah, I think probably even late last week, I think all I was hoping for as a Galway man was just a small bit of logic would be adopted in the GAA and that they wouldn't send us down to Cork, you know, the four teams. I was, as Murph was saying, I was concerned that like Clare, Tipp and Galway would all be heading down south into the one area, which would mean a nightmare to get into. And with that being said, you'd hope that they'd split the fixture, i.e. Galway, Tipperary and Limerick, and then presumably we would have hoped for a Dublin Clare in a Portlaoise, Tullamore type area. That wasn't to be now, and I think Dublin probably got the short straw in that event. And look, it's obvious that it's a scheduling issue. I think probably the TV is quite restrictive that they've had to move both games in the one venue. It's great. Look, for ourselves in Clare and Tipp, it's only over the road, but for Dublin, they won't be best pleased.
Yeah. I mean, Paul, does Páirc Uí Chaoimh feel a little bit unloved this year now? Because the Munster final was a very possible venue. In the end, then it didn't after a bit of back and forth at Munster Council with Clare preferring to go to Limerick than to go to Páirc Uí Chaoimh in the end. And now there was all this talk last week and it felt like we were almost being prepared for the idea that Páirc Uí Chaoimh was going to get one, if not two, of the quarterfinals. And now, as it turns out, Páirc Uí Chaoimh won't be getting any of those three games.
Yeah, like I mean, it's understandable. Like it's a fabulous stadium down there, and in fairness to it as well, it does have a good atmosphere as well. Like, you know, it's not one of those grounds that only if it has, you know, X amount of people in it is the atmosphere good. It does cater for a good game. But I think, you know, even just going forward, because nearly Twitter dictates so many things, it preempts any sort of a fixture at this stage if there is a debate, because people get their voice out there, they, I suppose, air their opinions, and it potentially could sway it. I don't know how much it swayed it, but particularly coming into the Clare Limerick game, you felt there was an influence because the public outcry could be felt on social media. But I think certainly next year, look, if it is the plan to use the grounds, because you have to use Páirc Uí Chaoimh as well, not just for Cork games, you know, just put it into the calendar so people are forewarned well before it, and it doesn't feel like that you're doing one supporter out of going down there. But I do think in the circumstance of a double header, like we all know, we've all been to Páirc Uí Chaoimh, it's not an easy place to get in or out of. And particularly at the hour of the evening that the Tipp Galway match is going to be finishing. Like, you know, you do have to take these things into consideration and to be fair to supporters as well. So bringing that amount of people down there, you know, it'll be a bit of a headache coming out of it. So absolutely, like, you know, a standalone game in future, you know, Munster final, whatever it's going to be. I know people will say you can't take that out of Thurles and so on, but I think just put one into the calendar there. Maybe Munster final next year is going to be in Páirc Uí Chaoimh because we want to use the stadium and we want to bring it around Munster. But at the moment, I just think this makes sense to have the Gaelic Grounds as the venue.
Well, Skell, I know you were spying on the football pod in the week just gone by, so you must be delighted as a Galway fan. Your Sunday is freed up to go watch the footballers against Mayo, and if you don't want to go to the game, you can watch it on TV because they've listened to the feedback about GAAGO, and it's going to be on terrestrial TV, despite the fact that RT2 is showing the Tailteann Cup semi-finals. So win-win if you're a Galway fan this weekend.
Yeah, I suppose, yeah. If you're a Galway fan who likes both sports, yeah. And I might just add, actually, Thanks to the football pod for taking the first 10 minutes out of their week last week to talk about hurling. So it's obvious that hurling is the hot topic. So jump on board, hop on the bandwagon there. But actually, well, I don't even know what time Galway May are going to be playing, but we're playing a league final at home against Loughrea, so I might just have to miss it.
Oh, what a pity, says he, that there's a scheduling conflict. To be fair to Paddy Andrews, by the way, I actually thought his point, Paul, was a very reasonable one, where he was comparing the Dublin footballers with the Limerick hurlers right now, where he said there were plenty of games over that spell. Like, he won 7 All-Irelands, but particularly in the run where they went 6 All-Irelands in a row, where Dublin got into sticky situations in big games, a bit like the Clare-Limerick game in the Munster final, and somehow they find a way to win. And he was saying it's incredibly difficult to build up that aura about a team, but when you build it up, it's a very powerful thing to have in your arsenal, that you know how to win games like that.
Yeah, completely. And even speaking to people after the Limerick game, like, people were looking at it from, I suppose, a very singular point of view, saying that one puck at the ball and the free and all this. And, you know, I've been trying to say to lads that, no, like, there's more to it, and it's very hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. It's just simply the case of the great teams being able to close out the game. And it's absolutely comparable to Dublin. Like, you think of so many times there, Dublin, and unfortunately it was usually Mayo at the other end of it, in be it All-Ireland finals or All-Ireland semi-finals, where they had the measure of them to a degree. But when it came down to the last 3 or 4 minutes, you know it's going to be one score that's going to dictate it. And when a team has their possession, they just use it so well. And there's that extra just air of calm and confidence about what they're doing. Mm-hmm. And invariably, I mean, you could go across any sport in this, invariably it's that quality that teams have, that, you know, you look back to any great teams in any sport, they manage to have it at really important times. And to be honest, I just think that comes from, I suppose, that being forged in the heat of being in these situations. Like, you know, Limerick this didn't fall out of the sky on top of Limerick, nor did it fall out of the sky on top of that Dublin football team either. It comes from hard days and actually losing some matches and drawing some matches and going through that heartache, but driving on with it. And then eventually, for a small period of time, you have this mental strength within a panel that's a mix of experience and youth and skill and talent and all these things. But you just have a belief that, okay, we are where we want to be, and now we're going to close out the game. And I would be saying to people, even after the Munster final, and I know it's an afterthought now, anytime I'm speaking to lads now, I'm saying that it's not by fluke that Limerick won that match. You know, I know we can talk about frees afterwards, but Paddy Andrews is right. Like, there's a quality in that team that it's nearly like another additional thing that teams have to deal with to beat them, in that when they're staring down the barrel of losing the game with 2-3 minutes to go, they still have the confidence and the belief that they're going to win the game, and they fully believe it. So that's another element that it's very hard to explain. And I'm sure, like Skehill, you point back to teams that you're part of, that, you know, when you were in that mode, like a team of a certain year or whatever it is, you know when you have it, and you know that you're capable of winning. And it's if you're lucky enough at any stage in your career to be part of a team like that, it's an incredible trait to have.
Do you think the biggest thing, though, Murph, I always found that this may sound like a buzzword, but it was like trust. It was like I say, in the teams that I was part of, it's obviously you could feel it. It's like it's hard to verbalize. It's hard to actually communicate to someone what it feels like. But it's like this. It's this hidden feeling. It's like an aura, as he said, whereby you're looking around at everyone on the panel, and they're all singing off the same hymn sheet. They're moving the same direction. There's no dickheads on a team like that. Whereas sometimes you might have teams where there's people pulling the other direction, and it's counterproductive. And there's a trust there. So when the heat of battle comes in, you can give a lad a certain pass, he'll get it. You know your defence will stand up. You know the management will make the right decisions. You know the subs coming in will be impactful, etc., etc. All these things are traits or characteristics of a successful team. Yeah. And so I agree with you wholeheartedly, Murph. Everyone, I suppose, will point to the last 20 seconds of the Clare-Limerick game and say, Clare were robbed. No, they weren't. Look, in fairness, Limerick did the robbing. They took what they got, in fairness, right? And they've been doing that over the last 5-6 years. So whoever takes them down, and the day will come, but it might be coming this year, whoever takes them down will earn it. And they might necessarily pass over the mantle from Limerick, but I said you're going to have to do an awful lot to be a team this quality, because they've been there, done that, and they've built up this trust amongst each other that no matter what happens, in any game, condition, referee decision, that they'll always be in with the point at the last minute of the game. And they only have to be in the lead once. That's it. So they're an awful animal to put down.
Well, that animal scale are going to be without their captain for definitely the All-Ireland semi-final. And again, I'm not sure exactly how bad the knee injury is, but when someone is ruled out of a semi-final a good few weeks out from the game, you would think that this could very well put his participation in the final in jeopardy as well. What do Limerick do now? to accommodate for his absence when it comes to the All-Ireland semi-final against Galway or Tipp in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, like for me, this is just me speaking. I would never thrust in someone new into a position as prominent and as important as number 6. So I would take someone who's on the team already and move them left or right or up or down. And I think the obvious choice in Murphy, you actually said it would be the likes of a Jimmy Burns type person to come into 6 and then fill that his role, fill the 5 role with somebody who's got game time in league and championship, i.e. a Colin Coughlin type person. That's not a bad shout at all. I just can't see a situation whereby Colin Coughlin goes into 6. Or Dan Morrissey goes up. I just can't see that because it's just too pivotal to the way the Limerick system is played. Because not everything, but an awful lot is centred around that 6 and starting up the channels. And like Declan's an awful loss. But we've had this feeling probably since the Waterford game that he just wasn't right. That's probably the reasons that Keane Lynch isn't playing. That there was something amiss, that he was carrying something. And like when you hear a knee injury, if someone said to me a hamstring or a soft tissue, I'd say fair enough. But a knee sounds more ominous. It sounds like ligament territory. It sounds cartilage. So I'd probably question his participation in the rest of the championship. That's a tricky one to get around. But look, stranger things have happened. We've seen it. Lads have come back from these injuries. But yeah, tricky position to fill. But I think the obvious answer is to put Burns into 6. I can't see Kyle Hayes in there. And then a strange one. I just want to throw out a bolter. I love a bolter. I believe Gearoid Hegarty plays centre back for his club. I'm just going to leave that there. Leave that right there. Okay.
You love a bolter. Jesus.
Hold on now. You can leave it there, or you can say, actually, do you know what? Hegarty at 6 might be inspired. Like, is it a possibility?
Look at anything's possible. I just he's such a good player. His hurling skills. We've often seen him in the half back line playing back there, even though he's not with the number on his back. But geez, lads, stranger things have happened. I'm not ruling it out, but it'll be a ferocious move. Like, don't get me wrong. But hey, did any of you expect Kyle Hayes a wing back or Barry Nash cornerback? No,
yeah. No, not
you
really.
didn't.
But
you didn't, Murph. You didn't. Okay, before you said Kyle Hayes,
I can't remember. I'll be honest. I can't remember what I thought when Kyle Hayes wing back. It's not a big moment in my life where I'm.
You said
I remember where I was when I heard that Kyle Hayes was going to be left half back and Barry Nash was going left cornerback. Like, I know you dwell on these scales. It's not like who shot Kennedy.
Yeah.
But to be fair, the other thing I was thinking with that is like, I don't think it's a question of hurling in terms of who replaces Declan Hannon. It's who steers the ship, who's coordinating it. Because it's the centre back at the moment in hurling. Like years ago, if you talk to an outlet, now actually that's a disparaging comment to make, but yeah, if you talk to someone who hurled a good few years ago, the centre back was the best defender you had.
You're digging your way out of this hole here. Go on.
I almost said if you talk to a fella that was hurling 30 years ago, and that's really making a terrible comment. No, if you talk to lads who hurled at a certain time, the centre back was the best defender you had. Like, that was the way it was. And the mistake you can make now in the modern game is thinking that the best defender you have is the centre back. The best defender you have isn't the centre back. The best person, the person that's at number 6 in a good team, was actually the coordinator and like someone that, okay, mightn't necessarily be going up and scoring points and, will be vacating that position to run up the field. It'll be making sure that everybody else is doing their job while Diarmaid Burns has gone flying up the pitch, and now you're going grabbing someone saying, sit back there for a minute, let him get back there. So it's not just a question of hurling. Of course, the person's going to need hurling. It's going to be someone that is a steady hand and dictates play. Like Gearoid Hegarty, like, it could be a bolter. John Kiely's well able to do it. But Gearoid Hegarty is a player in a team that you let to his own devices. You let him off and go wherever you want to go and cause problems and turn up wherever. The reason I think Diarmaid Burns will go in there is because, like, Diarmaid Burns and Declan Hannon are like the duo on that half back line, and the left half back kind of changes then, and they control it and they know how to rule that position. I think Diarmaid Burns will sit into centre back. You'll see probably Colin Coughlin then going to the other wing back position and Kyle Hayes, and then you have Diarmaid Burns dictating to people then. And it'll be also a test to say, Kylie will say to him, listen, it's no bother to you. You go in, sit in there, but control the lads. Tell them exactly, tell Darragh O'Donovan needs to sit back, tell Will O'Donoghue, whatever, but control that central area. It's not a question of hurling. I think it's a question of kind of captaincy. It's the reason Declan Hannon's the captain and he's there. He's, and the reason he goes kind of so unassummed during games while doing his job really well. He just steers the ship and he goes about his business, and he's not going to be the match winner by going up and soloing up the pitch like Kieran Carey or anything. But his job is probably more vital than that because it goes unseen. So I think the question is, and I wouldn't be surprised to see Morrissey out there either. Like, now Dan Morrissey as opposed to Tom Morrissey. I know, Skehill, you were thinking Tom Morrissey because you like a bolter and all that, but
push them all around.
I wouldn't be surprised to see the likes of Dan Morrissey arrive back in there and say, because another experienced person, you could slot in Mike Casey then into fullback and then bring in English into cornerback. There's options there. But I just think that...
Is that a lot of change in the full back line, though, given that Finn is out as well? Or, look, again, they're all very capable hurlers you've just named there.
It is, yeah, and that's the thing. And potentially, maybe you want to do a move that's not as much of a change. Like literally, you're slotting. It's like a game of Tetris. Nearly, you're slotting Diarmaid Burns across Colin Coughlin, who has played at wing back quite a bit and has been making features now as substitutes into games in that position. That seems to be the most likely substitute or most likely person that's going to go in. But I think John Kiely in this situation is just going to want to have someone that steadies the ship and have the flair happening everywhere else on the pitch. But this is going to want to be, just a steady hand who's in the middle and who'll control it from there.
Skell, if they win it, I know you said last week if Galway were to go the long way around and win the All-Ireland, it would be the ultimate success to get through Galway and to get through Limerick. For Limerick, though, their panel is being tested now properly this year. If you take it that we're not sure how Hayes' hamstring is going to be. His uncle Kieran Carey was saying last week he should be back for Croke Park for the semi-final, but his season has been curtailed by the Championship. Then you take the Sean Finn injury, now you take the Declan Hannon injury. They've been tested in their squad depth more than they probably were in the last 4 or 5 years here.
I think probably if you take up to the end of 2021, they weren't really tested. I think they were all really conditioned to come through those respective championships. To memory now, unfazed with injury. I don't think they actually lost anybody to any kind of injury of any sorts. None that we know about. Come in 2022 last year, obviously the Peter Casey crucial injury in the final, then mix that with Keane Lynch's situation, and you're saying, Jesus, and then they still come through that overall situation, the overall championship, with relatively ease. Obviously, they were tested in games, don't get me wrong, but they still cantered to victory, which is overall impressive. Now the question is how are they going to react with, as you said, all those people, and they've been mightily tested. And it's hard to explain because they're not long-term injuries, whereby you could say, right, I've lost Peter Casey, I've lost Keane Lynch, right, let's deal without them. They're injuries that lads are coming in, coming out. We've players who are in and out of form. So like whether you're rejigging your team, starting players who are not expected to be starters, or as a management team, let's say, trying to deal with the unknown. Is he back in 2 weeks? Is he back in 3 weeks? How do we prepare for this game, etc.? And it's the run in the middle of the Munster Championship. It's so hard fought. It's been a huge test to Limerick, and that's why I look at these tests. And like at the start of the year, we mentioned a whole host of possibilities with regards to referee decisions, weather, injuries, as probably the only way to take down Limerick. All of that has been thrown at Limerick, and it's seriously impressive. And I wonder if he does come through Keane Lynch and we see the Keane Lynch of old, because he hasn't really been there. Like there was pieces of it in the league. I think he'd agree with me, but he hasn't had the true run of form where by 2 or 3 games he's just been the all-conquering Keane Lynch that we've become associated with. If he gets back to some kind of form, like just Limerick automatically improve. They just improve to like twofold. I don't mean that. I'm not trying to belittle the lads that are there, but like his impact is so massive. Like I always think of the Ireland final they played against Cork in 21. Do you remember the performance he gave that day? I mean, that was just absolutely awesome. Like awesome. I think I actually said after that like no one else should be nominated for Hurler of the Year. It should be just him. That's the impact he actually carried that day for Limerick. So like if he gets back to form, that's a huge one. But if he's lost and Declan Hannon's lost, that's a test. Like, and when we say lost, we mean permanently lost. Let's say permanently lost. That's a huge test for Limerick. And if they come through that in a semi-final, whether it be Galway or Tipp, like that's fodder to them to go forward again, to say that like nothing can stop us. I mean that in a nice way. Nothing can stop us in the sense that they've truly been tested. They've developed a steely resolve, and keep rocking to final.
Murph, you were pondering a couple of nights ago as well, when we think about Hurler of the Year candidates and so on, that there's possibly no one standing out just yet as we get ready for the last 5 games now.
Yeah, I don't think so. Like, there's definitely people will have their own opinions and their own feelings as to, like the likes of Aidan McCarthy and Clare has been really good. There's people shown in different areas. Like Owen Cody has had great bits of flair, and Conor Whelan had a great game last week and stuff. But like usually at this time of the year, we have 1 or 2 front runners, and we're kind of talking of this person is in hurler of the year form. But if you think about it over the last few weeks, that conversation hasn't been there. Like, no, it's probably a good reflection in many ways, but it's also a reflection that no player has really been completely taken over games, irrespective of what team they're part of. And I just thought it was interesting points that, even thinking back to last year, we're looking at Aaron Gillan, we're saying, geez, hard to look past this fella at the moment. And then other players come into the mix then. But it's just interesting at this stage. It's probably maybe a fair reflection of how evenly balanced it is at the moment. Also, maybe a reflection that no team has really hit their pomp yet in terms of just absolutely dominating. Like every team has had their kind of off day. So it's just an interesting point that I was thinking of. Usually at this time of the year, there's people talking of this fella is going to be hurler of the year if their team makes the All-Ireland final. But just at this stage, it's not there yet. But like, that's the exciting thing, I think, over the next few weeks, is that we will have people that will, stick out of the pack there. And like, even the likes of Jason Ford could end up coming out of nowhere and getting hurler of the year, because we see that he's back in flying form, looks sharp, even though like at the weekend he was absolutely looked like he was never away from the game. And sometimes players can look like they're away from it after an injury. But it's just interesting to see who will actually step aside. And look, I know it's a side story. At the end of the day, we're all interested in who's going to get to semi-finals, who's going to be in the All-Ireland final and so on. But I just find it interesting at this stage, with all the skill and all the great games we have, there's no real front runner I can see at the moment, real obvious person sticking their hand up saying, this is hurler of the year form.
We've only 5 games left, yeah?
Yeah.
Do you want to check with the missus there, Murphy, to make sure I'm right?
18. How many games?
Unless they're going to magic out some kind of third, fourth place playoff here, I would be thinking you've got 2 quarterfinals, 2 semi-finals and a final.
She said, Google it.
We have 5 games left, right? And in those 5 games, we obviously only have like 6 teams. So you'd imagine hurler of the year is going to come from one of those teams, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
As you said, Murphy, it hasn't really come alight as of yet. There's probables. Like, Galan's a probable. Fairness, I thought Dahi Burke would be a probable. Owen Cody's definitely a probable. But there's no one sticking their head above the parapet, as you said. So whatever happens between now and the next 4 weeks, that's where a hurler of the year is going to be found.
No,
they're there too, hurler of the year.
Yeah. It's not a bad position to be in, lads. If you take, right, so I was doing the hurling power rankings on Thursday morning on OTB AM, and I think someone pointed out in the comments afterwards. So the team who I had in first place, who were Limerick, beat the team who are in 6th at the moment, Cork, by a single point. In between that, you had a whole load of games that were very closely contested. Cork and Clare, 1 point between them, the team sitting in 6th and the team sitting in 2nd. 1 point, obviously, in the 2 finals last weekend in the provincial finals. So there's barely been a puck of a ball between the vast majority of teams who've played each other inside that top 5-6 teams that are now left in the championship. So this is set up very nicely coming into this weekend here. So I guess we start with last weekend, which leads into the games this weekend. And unfortunately for me, I got to witness a bit of history, which I didn't really want to see on Saturday, which was the highest scoring total, both for a game and also by a single team in championship history. And that came in Tipperary's 738 total that they ran up against Offaly's 318. 318 should win the vast majority of games, but not when you ship 738 at the other end. Jason Ford coming back with 211, which is a big bonus for anyone who didn't transfer him out in fantasy hurling in the last round before the provincial finals. Mark Keogh scored 3 goals and 3 points during the match. Owen Cahill got 1-7 for Offaly, but went off with a hamstring injury. And his club year could be finished for Burr as well, which would be a huge blow for them if he doesn't tog as their main scorer. But it beats Wexford record from 1896, and it's the first game that's ever gone over 80 points between the two teams. Tipp were 1-7 to no score up after 9 minutes. Offaly got on the scoreboard through Owen Cahill at that point, and for the vast majority of the game, this was at 20-25 points. I think it was 25 points was the gap at the half hour, 3-24 to 8 points, and you're just thinking, even when Offaly had a good period in the second half, Tipperary still had a strong finish in them and win by more than 30 points in the end. So obviously it opens up questions, Murph, about particularly the idea of the Joe McDonagh finalists and winners going into the All-Ireland series at this preliminary quarter-final stage. We have had just the one win since they've entered in, which was 2019 when Laois came off the back of winning at Croke Park against Westmeath, and 6 days later they beat Dublin at O'Moore Park. Generally, we've had one-sided games, particularly against the Joe McDonagh Cup finalists. So nothing new about this, but a hell of a scutcheon that Offaly took at the weekend just gone by.
Yeah, it was, but I think something that I haven't really seen people talk about either is that Tipperary had to go out in this game and absolutely fire all guns blazing, because the last game we saw Tipperary in was the Waterford one, which was absolutely a flop. And for Tipperary trying to focus back in now on Galway, they had to go out and perform really well and just do away with Offaly, unfortunately. Now, if Tipperary had beaten Waterford in their last game, okay, no, they would have been Munster final. But let's say they didn't finish the way they finished in Munster. You may have seen a different performance at the weekend. You may have seen a few more players held back. It's hard to know. It's hard to know what the case would have been. But because of the last performance and the feeling around Tipperary had to go out and have everyone clicking, going really well, not caring what the scoreboard said, not caring what Offaly are doing. And because there's a quick turnaround to the Galway game, and they wanted everything in their mind being clear, being, okay, lads, we did what we needed to do. We said the hard words after the Waterford game. We had the hard training sessions. Like there was no better result for Tipperary at the weekend than putting up a score like that, because they showed they were completely, firing all guns blazing again. It's unfortunate for Offaly, absolutely. But I'd be interested. I didn't really hear much from the Offaly camp afterwards in terms of what their feeling of it was, because if you look at, I know a lot of the talk now is saying that this shouldn't happen at this stage. Certainly, there's an argument for the Joe McDonagh coming in and facing teams like this and Liam Cahill. Is it immeasurable, though, for the Joe McDonagh teams? The likes of Offaly, Will, you'd be best placed to speak with this. But, for a few years, they're nearly in the doldrums, kind of saying, this isn't where Offaly hurling should be. Now you're back up. Okay, your first step back into it, you're going to take a bit of a beating. But I know if you go down to Carlow and you talk to Carlow people, there was a great buzz around Carlow this weekend. The fact that Dublin were coming to town in the Liam Cahill. There was a really good feel-good factor. Carlow were up by a point at half-time. And I was listening to the game, and it was exciting, and you could hear that it was something that the Carlow people could get behind. It was almost a homecoming. Now, I know that wasn't the feeling in Tullamore, but there is positives from these games that I don't think have been highlighted. We've maybe focused too much on it. Doesn't do Offaly any good to finish up their last game of the year getting an absolute hammering. But I don't know. I think before you completely say that maybe this shouldn't have happened, I'd say go down and chat to people in Carlow and see, okay, they were beaten by Dublin. But there was a bit of a fanfare. And, one Carlow hurler, ex-Carlow hurler on the Sunday game said, it's brilliant, to see Carlow back in the big time. And it was almost a case that they were hoping for the best, but if it didn't work out, well, look, we're back where we want to be. So I don't think it can be too dismissive to say that all this was a waste of time. Okay, Tipperary didn't learn a whole lot from it. But at the end of the day, these two teams got to step back into Liam Cahill and say they played in Liam Cahill, and okay, they're getting ready for next year now and the year's over. But I do think there is a few measurables to be taken from these games where you go, okay, it's not all about what was on the scoreboard at the end. It was, the step back into Liam Cahill. But again, there is an argument for the other side whereby it says that does a beating like that do anybody any good? But I don't know, the likes of yourself, Will, and the Offaly people would be a better place to say.
Look, I think it's a learning curve. I didn't expect anything from Offaly going into that game, particularly when it had been 3 weeks since the Joe McDonagh Cup final. That's one of the issues too, I think, is that the Joe McDonagh is run off in such a condensed period of time. It makes no sense whatsoever that the two finalists then have to wait the best part of a month to go and play in the All-Ireland series. And if you win and you're in that good mood that Carlow were in, well, of course you're going to look forward to having a home game. And in their case, against Dublin, you look at that as a realistic game where you could potentially win and go to a quarter-final. You're very unlikely to beat the team who finish up in third place in Munster because they are so battle-hardened and hurling at a totally different level. And when you go to play them, and saw that at the weekend. I don't want to go in any of the Offaly players here from an individual basis, but there were mistakes that happened in front of goal that led to some of Tipperary's goals. There were plenty of presents that were laid on for green flags during the match as well. That's obviously disappointing. And then you see at various different times where the pace of the hurling just caught up with them. Now, some lads flourished in the same situation. There's part of me that kind of hopes that Offaly might be able to unearth another option at number 6 so Jason Sampson can play further forward, because Jason's been the Offaly captain this year, plays forward with his club for the best part or around the middle of the field, and he's moved back into a different position in 6 to play a role. And then when he was freed up by the fact that the game was dead effectively, it was you go out and hurl a little bit further forward, he looked quite impressive. And it's part of me kind of thinking he might add a little bit of extra firepower to the team further forward. But you could see that it was a struggle. You could see there were young players out there who were not at the same conditioning level that Tipperary are at right now either. But maybe that's no harm to get a chance to actually see that, because you're playing all year, and Offaly won Division 2A without losing a game. They lost the last game of the McDonagh when they were already qualified for the final, and they were beaten by a last gasp point in the final against Carlow. So I think Carlow and Offaly know the level they're at coming out of the Joe McDonagh, but this was a chance for them to play against teams who've been playing at a better level all season. In Carlow's case, they get to play the Championship at a higher level next year. In Offaly's case, they get to play in the league at a higher level next year. I think the more exposure that you get to top-level hurling scale, even if it results in a few beatings along the way, has to give you a chance to actually get accustomed to playing against those teams, because otherwise the gulf will just continue to be there.
Yeah. Look, I'm a big believer in team preparation. It's iron sharpens iron, Will. And in fairness, I suppose today is not the best day to ask the Offaly players, but if you do ask them down on the week, did you enjoy the game? And obviously people say, how did you enjoy the game? But they got exposed to a top level team like Tipperary. I suppose Offaly haven't played Tipperary in Championship in I genuinely don't know how long.
I think it was the game in Portlaoise in 2014 off the top of my head.
14. So
I got hammered that day as well. This isn't a new thing,
I suppose what I'm saying is this group of players, you'd imagine the majority, maybe Ben Keneally might have, but the majority wouldn't have played against Tipperary. So it's nice to get exposed to it. And like as I said, Iron sharpens iron. And in fairness to Offaly and Carlow, they can only play what's put in front of them. Now I mean that respectfully. So they have become accustomed to producing a level of a game that can beat the opposition in front of them. So they have not produced a performance this year, either Offaly or Carlow, that could beat Tipperary. Whereas Tipperary probably in third gear, having gone through the mill in the Munster Championship, as has been well spoken about, could produce a performance that was sufficient to beat Offaly Carlow. Now, for Offaly to improve and Carlow to improve, they have to continuously get exposed to this environment. You will not improve. It will not happen. I don't care what anybody says. It will not happen unless you get continuously exposed to this environment where you have no choice but for your iron, the sharp iron. So that comes in training when you understand. And yes, people say the golfing class. That's the way it is at the moment. However, next year could be different for Carlow participation in the Leinster Championship. Who knows what they might produce, and so on and so forth. Because it's a tricky situation. I know it's a hot topic at the minute as to where hurling is going. But for me, I would always be a big advocate that all the counties we speak about, the Antrams, Westmeaths, Kerrys, all these counties who are on the kind of up and down, having the yo-yo effect somewhat from the Liam Cahill to the Joe McDonagh, they need to continuously get exposed. They have to get exposed. Yeah. That's why when I hear about people and they're on about scrapping the league to a certain degree, I wouldn't agree with that. I think the league is a perfect, I wouldn't say stepping stone, but a perfect environment for teams to go accustomed to playing the top level teams who mightn't necessarily be at full strength. So like an Antrim, for example, or an Offaly, if they're in the main Division 1 league and they're throwing the full team out against the Tipperary, who might have 2/3, that's another little couple of percent moving forward. And who knows? You get the wheel going, lads. The snowball effect, it gets better and better. But if you're to, how would you say, completely divide and put everyone on one side of the room, the Tipperary, the Galway, the Kilkenny, and say, right, lads, you play your own championship, and then everyone else, hurling will never improve. The counties will never improve. It just won't happen. So we have to kind of, I suppose, go through this. Just go through it, and the Offaly's have to just persevere and keep at it, and the clubs and the schools, and it becomes a much wider, deeper conversation for hurling as a whole. But yes, it's easy to get distracted by the result and you say, no, this game should never happen. And I agree to a certain extent. I think Carlow, for me, deserved the opportunity to play, but the runners-up, I'm not sure. Okay, I think there's probably another way to structure that. So going forward, I'd like maybe for it to be reviewed. How do you review it? I'm not sure. What structure do you put in place? I genuinely don't know. Probably a structure that has more inclusion for fourth place teams, Leinster or Munster. I'm not sure. But definitely we can't have a situation whereby the winners of Joe Mac get isolated. So that's my 2 cents, and I'm throwing it in there.
Well, I think particularly, like if you look from both sides, particularly the Joe McDonagh side, like let's say the winners, let's say Carlow. Okay, Carlow are facing these teams next year, and that's where they want to be, and they're there because they've won the Joe McDonagh. Carlow, let's say, right, they won the Joe McDonagh, and they can go, right, we've won that now. Geez, aren't we brilliant? And maybe we're good enough. They've got one exposure now against Dublin, which won't kill their confidence, where they go, oh, geez, actually, this is the next step up. And before next year now, like the players get to go off. I think it's a brilliant thing. I think it's a very positive thing for a group of players. I'd love to know the work I need to do if I was a player, as opposed to going blindly into it. And like you could sit down as Carlow manager and sit down with Carlow and go, look at Dublin, look at their movement, look at Sutcliffe, how he moves here, look at Donald Burke, look at Conor Burke. And it won't come true half as well unless you put them on the pitch and you go, look at the fucking movement here. We can't keep up with these lads. Right. And you put them on the pitch and they suddenly go, lads, we got away with doing this in Joe McDonagh, but we won't get away with that in Liam Cahill next year. And they'll be able to then reference, like you'll have, Dara Gray next year going into a dressing room, or not Sarah Dara Gray, let's say one of the Carlow lads going in and say, look, lads, when Dara Gray got the ball, did you see him? He moved across this way and he supported. And that's something we're not doing. And you get away with that in Joe McDonagh, but you won't get away with that in Liam Cahill. And then likewise, for Offaly, okay, lads will go, that's a savage beating for Offaly. But Offaly and Carlow are the two, let's say, big fish, or the biggest fish in the Joe McDonagh. And there's an exposure, or there's a group of players now who have been exposed to what seriously high level is. And Offaly have expectations and plans to be back up in the Liam Cahill in the near future with what they're producing at minor and under 20 level. That is the plan, and there's no other way about it. That's the plan. You now have a cohort of players who have experienced what the serious high level is. They'll bring that back into the Joe McDonagh next year. They'll look to improve, and they look to improve by incorporating minor and under 20 players into the panel and setting kind of higher standards for them. Because at the bottom line, there's never going to be a situation where Offaly can suddenly just click their fingers, arrive back into Liam Cahill and not take a hammer. They're going to take a hammer at some stage. But the bottom line is, if you were to ask any Offaly supporter, where would you like to see and where do you expect to see Offaly hurl in the next 5 or 10 years? They'll say Liam Cahill. But when you take the smaller steps back, you go, will that involve a beating? Yeah, it's going to involve a beating, absolutely. But the players will get to see the tangible work they have to do. And for Offaly, what I would say is one of the points you'd see from the puckouts, Tipp were scoring at will because their movement was something Offaly never experienced in Joe McDonagh. So they get a free. Tipperary have set pieces that they're working on in the training where the movement comes around. And by the time the replay came back, Will, you didn't see it because you were at the game. By the time replay came back, you had, Jason Ford or someone or Mark Keogh running, pinging the ball over the bar because they were able to unlock Offaly. Offaly now can go, actually, lads, you see that movement? It was unbelievable. Do you think we can do that? Yeah, of course we can do it. So, I don't know. Maybe I'm overly positive, but I think there is stuff here that those teams take back now.
I think you're right, because I remember a game watching Munster Rugby, it was a couple of months ago before they got in the good run, and Graham Rowntree was questioned by the reporter as to why he's including so many young players. Yeah. And a phrase he used, and I mightn't have the correct wording, but he said a real life match experience is the best method of performance improvement. Yeah. So he said you can look at it on the video and you can assess analysis, you can do all that, but unless you catch the person and throw them into the environment and say, right, sink or swim, and then you ask them and you do a performance review, it's the best way. It's the best way forward because you can actually tell a real life experience, and that then review results in improvement. So I agree with you. Throw them in, not throw them into the deep end, but invariably yes, throw them in and. They have something to reference. So when Carlow come across now and they're preparing for next year and they see a 10 points, plus 10 points, 10-point gap, they'll say, how do we close the 10-point gap? And they'll have a reference match where in real life they've experienced it and say, this is the team that finished third in Leinster and we're 10 points behind them. Now, how do we close the gap to get third ourselves? Yeah. So that's why I'm I'm an advocate for it. I just, you'd like to try and avoid these types of beatings because you'd wonder, does do anyone good? But there is silver linings and everything, I think.
Yeah, the other thing that annoys me as well is some of the people who will be shouting loudest at the moment to remove the preliminary quarterfinals or to change the system will be the same people who will complain about the fact that these teams aren't getting a chance to actually close the gap to the top 8 or 9 counties as well. You can't have it both ways. You can't go, we would like to actually have fewer of these teams around so we have more competitive matches, and at the same time you want to keep them locked away as much as possible in the tiers. Because unlike the football, and we've chatted about this a million times before, because there's only one team coming up from Division 2A into the top division each year, there's a lot of teams who get caught in that yo-yo by the result of how difficult it is to actually stay within Division 1 hurling and to try and get that experience. So look, if it means that you have to suffer one or two one-sided games during the year, I think there's bigger issues across hurling than there is just to not see a competitive match. Look, this is what Johnny Kelly, the Offaly manager, had to say after the game. It's interesting, Murph, you actually pointed out the fact that it was I won't have seen the replays. Apparently, the footage went down on GAAGO with a few minutes to go as well. I'm not surprised because there was a monsoon with about 10 minutes to go. It was raining heavy, and then it got really, really heavy. And at that point, the lightning started coming down, and the lightning was actually reasonably close to the stadium. I was happy enough to be in behind the glass at that point, both staying dry and also if the lightning had actually come down. But I was kind of thinking, this is one of the first times I've ever seen a match where I was maybe the referee should be thinking about the health and safety of the players here because there's lightning very close.
Here it comes, NFL reference. Here it comes.
Go on, give us your NFL reference.
What did they do in America when lightning comes?
Probably go play golf in America, I don't know.
No, what they do is they have what's called a 30-minute delay game.
Right, okay.
Game stops, everyone gets inside.
I was at a game when I was young, and for years I was telling people I was at the Thunder and Lightning All-Ireland Final. I actually wasn't because that was played in 75 or something. But I was at a match in Croke Park. I always remember it years ago, and Kilkenny were playing, and they stopped the game for 10 or 15 minutes. Now I'm sure there's someone in the listening to this that could tell me what game that was. I was a chap.
Be in the comments, don't worry.
I say it was 5 or 6. I put it that way. I say it's maybe 5. I remember being in the Hogan stand. I remember the players sitting in the dugout, and there was lightning going on. And they just called it off for that very small period. Yeah. At the end of the day, I was kind of thinking, it is lightning, as in, and you have a lot of people running around here.
And what's your face guard made of? Fucking metal. To fry you. That's all I need now on the goals. If you're getting struck by lightning, your face guard being made of metal is not an important part of it. You're probably fucked anyway. Fucking. That's strike me twice now to put me down and say, Murph.
We'd actually spring a bit of life into you if they hit you by lightning.
Well, the life for me, God knows.
The ultimate sadism on top of all that then as well was as the game was ticking down, and I think Tipp's sixth goal had just gone in. The stadium announcer announces there's going to be 4 minutes of injury time at the end of the game, and you're just there thinking, ref, just blow this up right now and get everyone in and let everyone get dry. But unfortunately, the game went on, and the seventh goal went in for Tipperary.
The last time the lad blew up an Offaly match early now, Will, I don't know, I didn't get down too well. So.
There would have been no sit-down protest. Quite aside from no one wanted to sit down in the monsoon, I think they would have went over and thanked the referee this time around for a small mercy. But sure, look, this is what Johnny Kelly, the Offaly manager, had to say, by the way, when he was asked.
Always digging the goal. It worked out pretty well for Offaly, though, didn't it?
Well, exactly. The Clare, I'm sure I can see the Clare comments already causing problems at this stage on the YouTube at the moment. 15,000 people, by the way, watched the YouTube last week, which I think was our highest of the season, which was fantastic. I think we might look at another live this weekend. We'll work that out a bit later on. But this is what Johnny Kelly, the Offaly manager, had to say. Another Galway man talking about the win for Tipperary. And also, whether it should now be a case of the GAA remove the Joe McDonagh winners and finalists from the All-Ireland Preliminary Series.
Look, the Joe McDonagh final is the All-Ireland for that level, okay? And, today was a sort of it's a bonus to play the likes of Tipperary this time of the year, even though it mightn't appear so after that result. It is. It's there was no turnaround between the league and Joe McDonagh. For these teams that are really, brilliant Carlow won, fair play to them, but there was no gap between the league final and, we'll say, the start of the Joe McDonagh Cup. You're asking the counties that are struggling with numbers to play the most games in the tightest window. Not on. And it's not fair. And it needs to be looked at. And we're all intelligent people there. There's lots of guys around that have opinions on how this structure could be. Let's listen to the people that are on the ground that see this day in, day out. And maybe we can improve it that way.
So from your own point of view, do you accept that the Joe McDonagh winners and runners up, do they need to qualify into the All-Ireland? Do they need to play the All-Ireland, or would you rather the Joe McDonagh be more stretched out, that you have a proper detailed season?
Well, my own personal opinion is that the provincials aren't working. The provincials don't work straight up. If you look at the provincial campaign, there's good counties there that are gone out of it, like at top level teams. Yes, because the Munster Hurling Championship is such it's such a important competition in the GAA's calendar to keep that. But the truth is, it's not working. Leinster is a combination of so many teams. They'd be better served if they kept their provincial campaign as a league. But when it comes to All-Ireland Championships, pick the best 10 teams or 8 teams to go into that on an open draw and go that way.
Johnny Kelly there. Again, every single time it comes up, the idea of having a non-provincial based championship series, potentially with a group stage, seems to be the only solution if we're actually going to change this around. But maybe that's one for debate on a quieter week. A lot of the comments coming in, quite a few of them were around the Preliminary Quarter-Finals. What's the crack? Dairy Farmer on Instagram says Offaly and Carlow shouldn't be involved in the All-Ireland Championship. Pierce P. O'Connor, Offaly with 318 and still hammered. Is it too easy to score, and what can be done to change? I don't know what you think about that, Skehill. I mean, obviously this is the first time we've seen more than 80 points in a game. People are always talking about the fact there are too many scores in matches. This one probably comes somewhat down to Tipperary being absolutely out for blood when it came to the game after what happened against Waterford. I don't know, is this one a bit of an outlier, or is this a regular problem now with the amount of scores we're seeing?
I don't know. Score is one thing, but the gaps in matches is what I'd be looking for. This is an outlier. You're talking about 59 points to 27, so it's over the 30-point mark. But if you go through all our games, whether it be Leinster or Munster, there's only been, I think the average margin of defeat, there was 26 games including the finals in Leinster and Munster this year, and the average margin was 6 points. So it's not an awful lot. So I know people can say, oh yeah, it was easy to score. That's just one particular game. That's I would call that probably an isolated incident. But if you look at the games as a whole, all the championships, it's been very competitive throughout and on average. And I think the game has never been in a healthier position. There is the odd games where you get, let's say, if Kilkenny play Westmeath and you get beaten. I get that, right? But that's just it's the nature of the beast when you've got the championship structure the way they are. So I would say leave all well alone in terms of the rules of the game. I know people will try and I suppose structure the rules in such a way that it makes them more competitive, because whether we like it or not, supporters are spoiled. All supporters want is excitement. That's all they want. They want they want a rush of blood, they want excitement, they want hits, they want physicality, they want all that, right? So they don't really give a shit about the teams. They just want excitement. They just want, as a neutral, whether it be neutral or not, they want their product that they're watching on their television or watching in person to be the best possible product. And so if there's too many scores, they say it dilutes the product somewhat. So for me as a hurling person, I think we should be rewarding skill. So if a person can shoot like a Jimmy Burns from 100 yards, reward him. a sideline, reward them. You know what I mean? Or if a team like Tipperary can open up Offaly the way they can, reward them. So let them keep scoring at free will. It's up to Offaly to stop it, I'm afraid. That's just the nature of the beast, I'm afraid. But I wouldn't touch the game. Well, structures, yes, in terms of championships, I would have a little tinker with them. But in terms of the game itself, no, leave it alone.
Okay. This brings us around nicely because you already mentioned, or if you were like me, I got back, I put on around about half time, I think, when I got home in the Carlow game. So I had to put on KCLR for the Carlow versus Dublin game because there was no TV coverage and it wasn't on GAAGO. And that question has been asked by Connor Rob 93. Dublin versus Carlow game, not televised. How are Carlow and Dublin supposed to progress? Well, kind of, we want to take that as an all-encompassing question. I'm really surprised this wasn't on GAAGO. I don't know, maybe if putting Tipperary on was attractive because Tipperary are one of the real live contenders to win the All-Ireland Championship, and that's why it was on. But to me, this was the game that actually had the potential for a surprise with Carlow winning it. That's why I'm surprised they didn't show it.
Yeah, like if you were to pick one of the games that you thought there might be an upset in, it might have been Dublin and Carlow, but not Tipp and Offaly. It's hard to know why. And look, it's understandable as well, I suppose, for Carlow people to say, like, we're the Joe McDonagh champions, so maybe preference should be given to us. And it was actually an exciting game. Like, as in Carlow were up by a point at half time. Great crowd in Netwatch Cullen Park as well. If you're listening to KCLR, Brendan Hennessy was absolutely going cracked as he normally does when he's commentating. He nearly comes out of the press box. But it did sound exciting, and it's just the case that Dublin just pulled away in the second half. But it was more of a game than Tipp and Offaly. Look, again, maybe it was a case that they looked and they said, look, well, Tipperary here, maybe there'll be a bit more of a, I suppose, of a viewership here with Tipp and Offaly. I don't know, it's hard to know, but certainly
I don't know, Murph. I think most of Tipperary were at the game. I think there was about 7,000 Tipperary people there.
Yeah, well, there you are. Look, I mean, I think there was more reason to show Dublin and Carlow. I'd agree with you. So I think Carlow people can feel a bit more aggrieved that their game wasn't showcased. Yeah,
well, look, we were listening on the radio, but the course of it and having seen some of the highlights on the Saturday game as well, Carlow were ahead by a point at half-time, as Murph mentioned, 13-12. Then there's a goal from Mark Grogan after he was played in by Cian O'Sullivan, which put them in front. And after that, Carlow didn't go back ahead in the second half, but at no point did you really feel that they were buried, even just from listening to the game. And then there's about 8 minutes to go. I think it's either 9 or 8 minutes to go. Carlow have got it back to 2 points. Have a chance for a goal, don't score it, and then Dublin run off that 1-6 to just a point in the closing stages. But the Cian O'Sullivan goal came pretty much with the last puck of the game, which perhaps puts a bit of gloss on the scoreline as well. So even if it was a 10-point differential in the end scale, the reality is that for an hour, Carlow were incredibly competitive with Dublin, which is like something for them to build on going into next season as well, because if Carlow are going to get a result in Leinster, it's going to be probably against Antrim or Dublin or maybe Wexford.
Yeah, but I just wonder, does their objective change a bit now? Like, say, obviously Dublin they're in the middle of the championship. They didn't quite have the exertion I would say Carlow had with the number of games and whatnot. And Carlow are putting up a good contest towards Dublin. Now, granted, the conditions weren't hectic. There was a home crowd. Carlow probably got up a bit more for the game than Dublin did. So it's a 10 points lead. Not too far away, I'd imagine, when you consider the game as a whole. But I suppose it's easy for Carlow people, Will, what I'm trying to say is to look at the Westmeath, look at Antrim and say, right, they're the fixtures we're going to point towards. But if you're going to go anywhere, you want to be looking at the Dublins, looking at Wexfords and say, right, they're the fixtures we're going to target. And like aim for that level and then bring everyone else with you underneath that. And it's good. It just gives a base. I covered it already. It gives a base for Carlow to aim at. It gives them a target. It gives them, let's say, it gives them information. It gives all the players information that they know what to do. Their championship is over. They'll return to their clubs. They'll become, let's say, individual mindset for each club. And they'll probably return back in for county in the fourth quarter this year. And they'll know then that they'll have to get fitter, stronger. Hurling has to come way up. The pace of hurling, all the tangibles of the game, all that kind of stuff has to come way up if they're going to match Dublin. And they've got two great methods of doing it in the league. Is as a precursor, as a warmer, and then straight into the championship. So they've got ample opportunity. They've got time now. They're not being rushed for anything. And so I just hope that they put the right structure in place for the team and see can they go somewhere next year.
Yeah, we'll hear a bit from Richard Cody here, who's been, one of Carlow's most long-serving players of all time. He came on during the game against Dublin. He's won the Christy Ring 3 times. He's now won the Joe McDonagh 2 times after this season as well. And he was speaking to the aforementioned Brendan Hennessy after the game on the pitch on KCLR.
I suppose it went to plan, up to sure we aim and score 2 points down. We wanted to bring it down the home stretch. So from that point of view, it's disappointing the way we couldn't push on and equalise or go ahead. Look, look, I thought we did ourselves proud, but I suppose we said at half time that moral defeats are no good anymore. So look, we know where we need to be now next year, and look, it's back to the club now, and look, we'll bust on again. So look,
but all in all, you've had a few great years with Carlow. You'll have lots more great years with Carlow. It was a good year.
Oh, definitely. Look, we started the year to win Joint Done that, and we done that. So anything after that was a bonus. But as I said, we were 2 points down with 8 minutes to go, so the game was there to be won, and we didn't win it, which is disappointing. But we'll learn from it and we'll move on.
And that brings us around nicely to looking forward to this weekend's games. So, Murph, I'll give you the first shout because Junior Z Hurler, or Mife as he is on Instagram, was straight in contact with us and said, give me a reason that Dublin can beat Clare. How can Dublin hurt Clare at the weekend? So you've got first shout on that.
Do we say how they hurt them or where they hurt them? The obvious answer being in the car park after the game, is it?
Yeah, give us both, please. Yeah.
How did Dublin hurt Clare? I just don't see Dublin hurting Clare at the moment. Now, having said that, I didn't see Dublin putting up anything against Galway in Leinster semi-final either. So, let's say Leinster semi-final, what it turned out to be Leinster semi-final. But, I just don't see Clare. Clare, I think, at the moment are going, we want to get back into All-Ireland semi-final and play Kilkenny, or most likely play Kilkenny, and we want to push on. I just see Clare where they're at the moment, having just a bit too much for them. Again, if we're going on by form here, Dublin again, we're finding it hard to shake Carlow. Do you put Carlow and Clare in the same category? No, you don't at the moment. It's a good reflection of Carlow, and it's probably a reflection of Dublin that they're not pushing on to where they need to be, or they're not doing the equivalent of Tipperary to Offaly and just going out and getting rid of teams that they should be potentially beating fairly well. So at the moment, I don't see where Dublin can beat Clare. They're reliant on Danny Sutcliffe and Donald Burke, obviously hugely there, but Clare have the defenders to go out and account for those. And then Clare going forward, Clare's forwards, not to mind their forwards, but the lads they have on the bench are seriously strong. So I only think the moment that the way that Clare don't win this game is that Clare don't come tuned for this game and are looking one game ahead as opposed to looking at this game. I think that's the only way, unfortunately, because I just don't think realistically Dublin are in a position to go and have a savage tilt at Clare. I don't know, is there, it's not even a game whereby that there's much baggage going into this for Dublin where they have a grudge against Clare, where they can even muster something there. It just seems very much that on form, on skill, on teams on paper, I don't see where Dublin can actually even muster this at the moment. I don't see the threat coming from anywhere in particular. So, the first game, I just see going Clare's way. I don't think it might even be a hellraiser of a game. I think it's very much that Clare will just be, once they get into the groove, they'll just keep them at arm's distance and just see out the game, and potentially even taking off a few players, keeping lads fresh up until the All-Ireland semi-final. So, look, unfortunately, I don't see as a Dublin supporter going to this game a huge amount. Love to eat my words Monday morning, be happy out to do it, but I just don't see it happening.
Right. That's a fairly grim assessment for anyone who's thinking of getting the train down to the Gaelic Grounds on Saturday afternoon, Skell.
So promote the game there, Paul.
Yeah, give the Dubs a bit more hope here.
What do you want me to do? Promote the game? That wasn't in the question. Promote the game. Jeez, sorry, I didn't go full Don Logan in there, mentioning the emergency halfway through it,
Oh, jeez. Okay, where did Dublin hurt Clare? I can't see an awful lot of places where they do hurt them. I think Donald Burke didn't score from play at the weekend. And if he's going to, if Dublin are going anywhere, I always pick on the big players, the big teams that have to stand up hugely. So Donald Burke is going to have to come up with double figures. Keenan Sullivan's going to have to come out with 1, 3, or 4. Grogan the same way. Dan Sutcliffe, that's what the level of performance that the Dublin forward is going to have to produce to be Clare. Now, will they do it? I don't think so. I can see Donald Burke might get a point or two. Danny Sutcliffe might get a point, Keenan Sullivan might get 1-1, but all that doesn't accumulate to a scoreline that can take down Clare. On the flip side, can the Dublin backs hold the Clare forwards? I don't think Dublin will have seen what a team like Clare up to date, because when you go through all the teams that Dublin have faced, every team plays pretty much orthodox. They play with a kind of a 2-man for forward line, 3 to 4 man half forward line, limited movement, and you can kind of set yourself up for that. Clare go kind of all over the place. We know the pace they have with Taylor, Fitzgerald, Kelly, McCarthy, Rogers, etc. So I think they'll show no dimension at Dublin. I don't think Dublin will have the answer. We've seen these quarterfinals before that Dublin have played in thirds against the Waterfords and these teams, and they might stay in the game for a period, and you might be surprised with their first half and say this is a close game. But ultimately, I think it'll stretch out. I think Clare will have not even the pace, but it's the pace of game. The pace of Clare's hurling, Dublin won't be able to keep up with it, in my opinion. And I think, as a whole, I think Dublin, if they can be competitive, ultra competitive, and have a good attitude for the whole game, and keep this to like a 1 or 2 score game. What I mean by that is 4, 5, 6 points. That's a good result for Dublin. That is a really good result when you consider, as I keep saying, new management and the new turnover of players. So when we decided what's a good year for Dublin at the start of the year, we said getting out of Leinster and being competitive in the quarter-final, and who knows after that. So I think if that happens, if they can maintain competitiveness at the weekend and keep it to a 1-2 score game, that looks like a successful year for me, for Dublin. So, but I can see a situation that's whereby they take down Clare. There's nothing, there's no part of their game, there's no players that I can see that actually have it in their armory to take them down. So I'm going to go Clare by, realistically, I'm talking 7, 8, I'm afraid.
Just to take up Murph's point as well, Skehill, about the idea that maybe Clare come into this with half an eye on Kilkenny, maybe thinking about getting back for a third match against Limerick and not totally focused in the moment. I don't think you're going to see that from Clare. Not with the way they've hurled in the championship so far this year. I'd be very surprised if there was a flat Clare performance. Now, I know against Wexford at this stage last year, they only really came to life with about 10 or 11 minutes to go, but they still got the job done. I don't see Clare having any Munster hangover on Saturday.
It's hard to see. I suppose if they were playing a team, I mean this in a nice way, better opposition. Like I think they'd get up for them emotionally. I think Clare are quite emotional based. I think their team management supporters are very emotion based. It's like they're very united, if you know what I mean. And like I think Clare needs. They need reason to go at a team, if you know what I mean. Like Limerick is the obvious one. Tipperary is history. Munster is very easy to pick up a reason as to why you want to go at a team, but maybe Clare have no issue with Dublin or no beef with them, let's say. So emotionally, you say, where's that going to come from? So they'll depend on their skill. And sometimes in these games, what you see is it starts off kind of flat. You don't see the Clare you expect. Sometimes they start off, there's only a point or 2 minutes at half time. And then after that, then they've got the scare and they just turn up the dials, turn up the heat, and then they stretch out the victory. That's the way I kind of see the game going. I can't see them racing in and hitting as hard as they've hit against Limerick. I can't see a situation like that because I don't think the game warrants it. I don't think they themselves, and you can say it. This can be discussed in the dressing room. This can be mentioned by management teams. This is coming down the tracks. We want this off you. We want the insatiable desire. We want the aggression, just like you get against Limerick. But there's something in the human body or the brain that just doesn't program that way unless you've got the enemy in front of you. And for right now, Clare's enemy is Limerick. That's the reality of it. And their enemy is not Dublin, I'm afraid. So I can't see them producing the same level of aggression, intent, energy for the first few minutes or 20 minutes like we saw against Limerick. But ultimately, that'll wear down Dublin and they'll steam through. So it still doesn't change anything, Will. I just think it'll be a different type of performance. It'll be a different type of emotion performance. And it'll be more of what I would class as a workman-like performance. Just getting through it, getting the payday, and I'm afraid moving on.
Yeah, championship meetings between these two teams fairly rare as well. Dublin beat Clare in an All-Ireland final at the tail end of the 19th century, but for recent memory, Clare won in the championship in 2012. Hey, look, hurling existed back then as well.
I know, 19th century. Okay.
Yeah. I think it was 1896 or 97 from memory, and then Dublin. Oh, who knows? I'm sure it was one of your Galway lads who were reffing it, no doubt. And Dublin won when they met in the championship back in 2010, which is 222 to 15 points. But precious few championship meetings between the sides, so that rivalry isn't really there, Murph. What Skehill just mentioned, though, Murph, was this idea of sometimes you go in and you're maybe not as switched on when it comes against, say, a team that you don't have a rivalry with, or where that kind of natural motivation isn't there. Did you ever feel that in a game where you went into a reasonably big match against a team you didn't really care about, and as a result, maybe that fire wasn't there?
Yeah, from a similar position, let's say when we've often mentioned when we lost Leinster final in 2012, we had faced Limerick, was it the following week or 2 weeks later? I can't remember what it was. But, we hadn't a rivalry with Limerick at that stage. Kilkenny had played them in 2007. But even there was a turnover of personnel in the Limerick setup there, and there was no residual kind of a feeling after that. But we had to play them. We were coming from one place, they were coming from another place. In that, we'd been beaten heavily in a Leinster final. We were dealing with that, and they just did come through a Munster as well. And we're just coming from two different angles, and it took us a while to get into that game. But eventually, when we did, it was just a matter of getting over the game and assessing where you were then, what can you take for that, and you were building then for a tilt at an All-Ireland semi-final with Tipp. So that's where we came from. I suppose kind of similar in ways to where Clare are coming from. Clare didn't take a beating, but they were disappointed after Munster final. They wouldn't take much to bounce back from that for Clare now. Clare are just reassessing. But I think the trick for Clare here is, all the narrative up until now has been Munster, and without fail, the conversation has been about Limerick. And sure, they can't meet Limerick now until an All-Ireland final. Isn't that's right?
Yeah.
They can't. Yeah. So Clare actually have to go now, and I agree with you, Skehill, 100%. They're an emotional team. They play an emotional. They play in the tradition of what they're doing and all these different things, and the crowd getting behind it. Like there could be an argument for saying last year in the All-Ireland semi-final, was that emotion there, or we still don't know why that performance came about in the All-Ireland semi-final against Kilkenny, but there was no passion involved in that All-Ireland semi-final. So now Clare have to go through 2 games essentially where the narrative isn't about Limerick or isn't about anything like that. It's playing 2 games that you need to, like, if they want to get to an All-Ireland final, that go and beat these 2 standalone teams, find a reason to get emotional if that's the way you play best, and go out and beat them. And I do think there is a kind of an element here where they can be flat. They can go out flat against Dublin because granted they have the better hurlers and so on, but those hurlers hurl best when there's a bit of fire in the belly and they feel a bit aggrieved and there's a bit of anger. Will they feel that anger against Dublin? I don't think they'll feel that anger against Dublin. So I think this could be quite flat of a game, and agree, Skehill, you touched on it there. I do think this could be quite flat, but that's the challenge for Clare now. It's not about anybody else, it's about yourself now. Like, as in, are you self-motivated, or is it the case that you get angry at other teams, and that, this team we felt hard done by, we should have beaten them, and so on. And, is it a case that you're happy to just go and perform for yourself, that you're going out there to win for you, for the panel, you're going on to the semi-final, and that's the motivation there. So that'll be the trick for Clare, and I think they're fully capable of doing it, fully capable of getting up for any game, absolutely. But it's a new angle now. The narrative isn't about Limerick anymore, it's about you going through, and the narrative, if they beat Dublin, it'll be a case of, you're facing Kilkenny. What's the hang-ups from last year? Is there any? Won't there be any playing in Croke Park? Are you all right playing in Croke Park? You don't win so many games up there. This is going to come back again. So, touching on what Skehill said there, take the emotion out of it and get very practical and pragmatic about it. Like, you're going to win games here. You're going to get to an All-Ireland final, and you have to beat these teams if you want to get there. So, do you perform the same way you do when Limerick aren't on the table? That's the next question for Clare.
And Skehill, for all your cheek, Wikipedia had the answer. Second ever All-Ireland final. Dublin beat Clare 5-4 to 1-6 in Inchicore, and John Considine was the referee. So now.
Jeez, I would have said Daniel O'Connell was the referee or something like that. That was the time, yeah. That was a time that someone from the IRB had thrown in the ball or something like that at the time.
Probably,
The game was played at 3 in the morning under candlelight or something. Like, they weren't allowed to play it or something. Yeah,
there you go. Well, it wasn't until 1895 that they went to Jones's Road to play games, which is now obviously Croke Park at this stage. So you had Burr for the first one, then Inchicore, was in Drumcondra for 3 years in a row, played in the Phoenix Park then, and then back to Drumcondra for one more, and then they went to Croke Park after that. Now, there's a few others. They went to Dungarvan and to Cork and Carriganshore, and it moved around a little bit before it went back to Croke Park again. But that's your early hurling history for you for today.
Yeah. And a random one then, Harry Boland refereed one of the games. Michael Collins is kind of left-hand man. He refereed the Leinster final, and I think he hurled in the Leinster final as well, but he refereed one of them, all right. So there was kind of we're getting well into the history here now. We're out doing Don Logue again with he went to World War II. We're going right back to the late.
But see, it's far more interesting, Murph, before World War II. Like Kerry winning a hurling All-Ireland before they won a football All-Ireland. Kerry won the 4th ever final. So back when Wexford were the kind of unlucky losers back then as well. So we'll get a hurling historian on for one of the shows. We'll do a random one at some point. James Murphy was in contact as well, Skehill. I think he made an interesting point. This was when we were in the waiting stage this afternoon to see where the fixtures were going to be. And he was saying that if Clare had an option, would Croke Park be a good choice to have played the quarter-final in? Because the hurlers have only hurled there a handful of times since 2013, haven't won there since the All-Ireland final that year. And he was saying if they're going to go back there to play against Kilkenny and potentially play an All-Ireland final there, that if the option had been there, Croke Park would have probably been the perfect venue for Clare to hurl in.
Yeah, it's a very good shout. And I remember back, just if you take this on a personal level, I remember a few years ago, it could be 10, 15 years ago, we at home, let's say, we used to have this mental blockade. We're playing in Loughrea. We hadn't won a game in Loughrea in senior for, it could have been 6-7 years. And all the time we performed bad. And like, all it was just a mental block. That's all it was. And once we got over the first game, it took off. I think we've won probably 90% of our games there now. But the fact of the matter is, it was nothing physical. It was nothing, in your preparation. It was just all in the mind. That's all it was. So if you take this game now and say, right, let's clear the Clare players. And like, I'm not talking about all the Clare players. I'm just talking about all it takes is maybe one or two, or even someone in the management or supporters that, oh shit, we're going back to to Croke Park. It's been 10 years. We're playing a team that decimated us last year. That the fact that you're actually having that conversation is an issue. You know what I mean? Whereas I think there's something in what that man has said. Go back to Dublin, theoretically take care of business. Now that voodoo is gone. It's out. It's finished. And you move on to the next one. So it would have been a bad shout. If the option was available, I doubt it was though. I can't see it being available when you consider bringing 3 teams up versus 1 team down. I can't. But if the option was there, I would have taken it from a Clare perspective. Certainly if I was a Clare player or Clare management, I would just like to go take care of business, get it done, and this thing just start afresh for 2 weeks' time with the Cats coming down the road.
Then it's not even a conversation either. That's the thing. No one can turn around and say, "Ooh, Clare's record isn't great since 2013." Because you're saying, "Well, they just won there a couple of weeks ago before they go into a semi-final." So.
You've just said it. Like Murph just said the narrative when he spoke about Limerick, and he's right. But if you play that game and win it, you've just taken that out of people's conversation. You've completely taken it, and it's gone. And now all it becomes is just the performance. It's just Clare versus Limerick. And what will happen then invariably is that people will focus on Clare's good performances this year versus what they produced last year. Granted, that will become part of the topic because it's just the nature of the way people are, and they're comparing the 2 teams and the fixture itself. But yeah, if that game was available and you go take care of business, you just rule out a whole different avenue that people can come at you, and it's gone. But alas, not to be. So this time next week, we're going to be talking about Clare, how they didn't win in 10 years. Big issue for Clare.
Well,
leave it to you, Murph.
Yeah, what would you have done, Murph? If the choice had been there, would that have been a good option for them?
Oh, I agree with Skehill. From a player, from a management, I'd say from anyone on the panel with Clare, I think you'd love to go up and rehearse basically for your All-Ireland semi-final. This is not to sound disrespectful to Dublin or anything like that, but like there is a huge part to be played in the full day that surrounds playing a game, like in terms of getting that down, getting your routine down. Like they're going to jump on a bus there, if let's say, right, beat Dublin, you're getting ready for an All-Ireland semi-final, you're getting on a bus there, heading up to Croke Park. All that stuff is hugely important for getting players ready, and it's not to be dismissed either. And I think if the Clare supporters were to be selfish for their team here in terms of, I suppose, allowing their team to do this, you would want the Clare team to actually play in Croke Park and play Dublin there, because it's a great, let's say to go and win it, it's a great dry run to go and actually play against Kilkenny, because you can fine tune a few things. Like I remember we played Skehill up in Salthill. It was the time Ed Sheeran dug the pitch out of it, I think in 2018, I think it was. It was a scalding sunny day up in Salthill. Never saw that much sun in Salthill before. Usually we play in the league or the Welsh Cup up there, and it's lashing rain. Yeah. It was roasting hot, and we completely got our preparations off because we arrived a little bit late. And then when we got to the hotel, they fucking had boiling soup and everything, and we were roasted. Now I know lads be listening to going, "What are you talking about?" Yeah. We were absolutely wrecked. We were drained from the sun getting into the dressing room. And from now on, I'm fairly sure Kilkenny stay up. Literally after that game, Kilkenny stay the night before in Galway after playing them in the round robin, because the 3 hours on the bus, they're trying to get that right. And then suddenly you get stuck in Salthill traffic and you're half an hour behind now. And now you're racing to get through and you're rushing players. Players like to be relaxed. They like to have a few bucks around. They like to have enough time, but not so much that you're hanging around. All these things are things that you have to cater for, not just going out and physically playing the match. So I think, I know in a long-winded way about it, if Clare had an opportunity to go up here and play in Croke Park, absolutely. You played in the Gaelic Grounds enough this year, lads. Go up to Croke Park, play a game there, get the mental side of it out of the way, get the preparation side of it out of the way, and it would stand to you more than playing in the Gaelic Grounds, I fully believe.
Well, Skehill, I didn't have to dip into ancient history even for the rivalry between Galway and Tipperary, because quite a few meetings in Championship and in the business end of Championship over the last decade. So you'd be delighted to know Galway have won 3 of the last 4 meetings between the teams, including the last time they met in Limerick, which is the quarter-final in 2020. Also in the semi-final in 2017 and the 2015 semi-final when the teams met. We get to talk about the Canning glory point and all that. Tipp did win the 2016 semi-final at Croke Park, the qualifier at Semple Stadium in 2014, and the quarter-final back at Croke Park. So it's a pretty even share over the last 13 years. But Galway have had the better of the meetings over the last 6 or 7 years here, Skehill, when you would have been heavily involved with the teams in those games.
And I think it probably coincided too, Will, that they were probably both counties had probably generational teams. I think probably through that phase, if you go through, from 15, 16, them years, I think the Galway team that was there was probably the best Galway team that was produced over the last 30 odd years. And like that with Tipperary, the nucleus of that team wasn't just 1 or 2 people. It was 7 or 8 guys that we still see playing today. Norman McGrath, Seamus Callanan, Bonner, all these guys. So I just think it was a good rivalry that developed. And like, personally speaking, I know I'm accused sometimes of speaking my mind too honestly, right? But Jaysus I, I have good friends in Tipperary, right?
This is a dangerous.
This is going to be good.
I have a club man, right? And he's your best friend, right? James Egan. He plays with us here, right? But Jays, I hate Tipp. Jays, I hate them. I don't know what it is. It's an insatiable hatred. And my uncles would always say to me, when you have the hay saved and Tipp bet, that's a good summer. So it's like, and that's it. Or we have to win this game by any means possible. And that's I guarantee there's Galway players at this minute saying we have got to win this game. Whatever it is, when we talk about emotion, like we don't have rivalries with anyone in Connacht for obvious reasons. So we pick our nearest neighbours. So for me, my biggest rivalries are with Clare or Tipperary, just personally from my playing days. And I guarantee you 9/10 of that team there now are looking at Tipp with just, there's an arrow, there's a bullseye in their back. And likewise, go down to Turles training tomorrow evening, there's a bullseye aiming up the way too. So it does, and it's a great fixture and always produces the goods. I can't remember a Galway Tipperary game, certainly in the last 10 or 12 years, that it actually failed to produce a really exciting, maybe 1 point, 2 point finish. So that's what I'm expecting again. And ultimately, what you have now is two teams who probably didn't see the year going the way they wanted to go so far, truthfully speaking. I think Galway probably wanted to win Leinster, Tipp probably wanted to get to a Munster final, probably coming from two different positions, and they're going to go hammer and tongs at it. And when you ask me who's going to call it, again, it's similar to last year's Leinster final. I'm really, really want Galway to win. And I'm going to say this is on draw territory. This is 1 point either way. This is draw territory. But I'm sneaking Galway for a point. I just think they're very, very hurt. From speaking to a couple of them locally here, very hurt to what happened over the last week, and hungry and driven, and kind of fed up too with a lot of the shite that's been said in the media. Like, if I hear this phrase one more time, what Galway is going to turn up? I mean, I hate that shit. Like, for ultimately, like, say, take the last game for example, right? Galway played Kilkenny. And everyone will point, and I did it myself because I was kind of probably emotional at the time, where Galway go down by a certain number of points and you're saying that they're producing pure shit. Then they turn it on and they come back and go ahead, let's say. And that's probably what people are, the public or the other members of the media are saying, that this is what, do they get the Galway that go down 7 or 8 points, or they get the Galway that can open you up? That's just Galway. We just come and go. We haven't flown the games, but ultimately we're within a score or two. And I think Paul Bellew, the Galway chairman, he gave me a great stat a couple of weeks ago. Now, I don't have the specific years, but over the last number of years, I'm going to go back 7 or 8 years, when every game we've been knocked out, right? We've always been one score heading into injury time. One score has been the gap. So you know that they were always there. We're never beaten 15 points or 10 points, never. So we're always one score within heading into injury time. So I know for a fact that come Saturday evening, that heading into the 71st minute, there's going to be one poke of the ball in it. And I'm just hoping it goes the right way.
Right, not to get off the point here, and you're pissed off about what the media are saying, whatever else, but is consistency not a genuine issue about Galway this year, though?
I just think it's a popular topic. I just think if you're to associate any issues with a team, I just think at the minute it could be, people will point to Clare being overly emotional, saying the semi-final last year. People will point to Limerick possibly with injuries and being the top dog taken down. People will point to Waterford and to be the management. When you come to Galway, it's consistency. It's consistency and underage development through to senior. And it's just, it's like a tag that has been associated with us for, it's been a long time. I think it's been in our history. I don't think it's ever been, it wasn't developed recently. I think go back as far as 1989, 1990, when Cork bet is like, that it was a consistency when we came out after half time. I'd say that's when it started, you know what I mean? And it's just carried through. And to be fair, there's been days whereby, it's been warranted. There's been the truth. But I think in the last number of years, I don't think it's ultimately fair. I think we probably play what's in front of us. I think when you see us playing the Dublin, where it's hard to get into the psyche of a player at times, we don't exactly expect the same, I suppose, opposition. I mean that in a good way, that you get against Kilkenny or against Limerick, and maybe our performance then mirrors that. When you put us out against a Limerick, a Kilkenny, we produce a relatively good performance, and again, always within one score. So I get what they're saying. I just think it's an easy one to pick on. It's an easy one to pick on. But again, that statistic that Paul Bellew told me was a fabulous statistic. And that probably paints a better picture of where Galway are at business in the championships versus what people just say they're not consistent. So
right. Murph, let's pass the question over to you. Are Galway flaky then?
Whoa, hi, you're lining up now. You're steering him in a direction now. You're steering him in a direction.
I thought you were reacting because I didn't react quick enough to that question. I was like, Jesus, that was harsh. Like, I'm only breathing in here. Look, Galway aren't flaky. Like, the one thing I have to look at from last weekend, right? It came down to that game could have went either way, and there was a feeling there, 30 seconds, a minute before the end, when Kilkenny got the last point, where I went, this is Galway's now. And let's say the game ended there. Galway go out and people are really excited about Galway. They go, geez, these lads are in a good place now. Henry has them ticking over. Okay, grand, they had their few results, but geez, they're a dangerous team, aren't they? And they'll be pointing out all the great things to them. One, Killian Buckley poking that ball into the back of the net has changed all that. Break of a ball has changed the opinion of Galway. No, they're not flaky. We wouldn't come up against Galway going, they're flaky. We would have always said against Galway is that if you're not right, they'll hurt you. That was what we would have always said about them. And I think particularly the team at the moment, they have savage players, and they've been just trying to get it to click, and they almost got it. If they won that Leinster final, what way would we be looking at Galway right now? We'd be saying these boys could go and beat Limerick. That's what we'd actually be saying, because they have the personnel. There's no doubt they have the personnel. It's just a matter of clicking. And what I'd be saying is, look back to last year, and when Galway do play with that bit of emotion as well, they're a savage team. Look back against the Cork game last year. After that, when you see the players coming on to Henry and stuff, and you see Henry with Dahi Burke afterwards and Johnny Cohen and these lads, and you could see, geez, there's something about this team, but maybe they just need another year. Tipperary are the ideal people or the ideal team for Galway to be meeting, because genuinely what Skehill said there, I do believe, even more than Kilkenny, it's Galway and Tipperary would have a bigger rivalry in terms of Galway and Kilkenny. Galway and Tipperary have a more vicious rivalry than that, because I remember when we played Skehill in Tullamore in 2014. Mm-hmm. I was marking Johnny Lynn. Again, get your Johnny Lynn marker out there today. We're mentioning him. But I was marking him. And after that game, we marked each other in both games. And after that game, I shook hands with him. And in fairness, I always said about him, you'd always shake hands afterwards and there'd be no bit of bad blood there. And I said, listen, best of luck next week. And whatever. And he said, as long as we beat them bastards next week, I don't care. And I remember, it's Jesus Christ, the game's only over 5 seconds. And they knew they were playing Tipperary the following week. I'm fairly sure he can check that back.
That is the purest Johnny Glenn answer I've ever heard. And
he wasn't even angry at me. He was there going, geez, as long as we beat Tipperary, I don't care. And I'm fairly sure he can fact check that now. I'm fairly sure he played Tipperary the following week again, in 2014. But that was the attitude. It was the attitude of, we have to go and beat Tipperary now. And I do think that to focus the mind for these Galway players is similar to, maybe Clare not getting up for Dublin. Galway can't not get in the mood for Tipperary. They can't not get. And I do think it's obviously, going to be tipped as the game of the weekend, because it's two absolutely savage teams, two traditional teams going at each other. But I just think that there is stuff that goes out the window a little bit here. I do think we'll see a right good match where teams physically go at each other. There's going to be hard hits. It's a great game for Tipperary as well. Absolutely brilliant for them, because they're trying to get their show back on the road and prove that the blip on the radar was Waterford, that, they're here to have a serious tilt at the All-Ireland, regardless what they say. So there's a lot on the table here for both teams to have a real savage tilt at this and make a real game of it.
But isn't there a small bit of pride in the province too, though? For me, I'm not even from the province, right? And obviously we've listened to an awful lot of talk throughout the year that the Leinster Championship is a waste of time. That forget about it. It shouldn't even be in existence. And I'm looking at it now. This is team number 2 versus team number 3 in the respective provinces. So I'm saying it's just another little bit of spice to add into the fixture. And if Galway come out on top and beat Tipperary, well, then you can catch your Leinster issues and you can fuck them out the window. It's as simple as that. Because it's as simple as that, Les. I'm sorry. And on the flip side, if Tipperary turns over, it's kind of grind the teeth mode. But this is one of these. I remember Niall Hayes. We drew Waterford in the quarter-final in 2000, and I'm going to say 2009. And he was giving a talk beforehand to Damien's brother, and he said, "We have to develop and I quote, a beef with Waterford. We have to fight because we had never played them really, so we had no real issue with them. We have to develop a beef, and we couldn't go out play Waterford in, and their crowd are right behind them during their pomp, and we'd no match for it. Whereas now there's no need to even mention that. It's just you'll walk into training now tonight or tomorrow, and won't be a word said. You just feel it. Yeah, this is it now. It's coming on the tracks. You just feel it, and it's fucking. Tis shit now. Or you have to pot.
What improvements do you want to see, Skehill, from the Leinster final then? And I appreciate, by the way, as much as I'm trying to wind you up by saying things like flakiness, is that the reality is that if that goal doesn't go in, the whole complexion of the championship looks different. It's amazing what a difference that actually makes to the entire season for Galway. But what do you want to see from Galway improved upon from the Leinster final?
Well, we have two things in our favour. Number one is our forwards have pace. We've great skill base and we've pace. And it's my belief that the Tipperary backs, they're not what they were in terms of athleticism and pace. So I want us to see attack them. And if we can run through them, if we start doing against Kilkenny where we lump and ball over and over again, that'll get mopped up, that'll get broken down and shifted up our far side. I want us to see run through them and turn them onto their own goal, Make Ronan Maher go back, make the Heffernans, Seamus Kennedy's, all these guys, Noel McGrath's, head for their own goal. We don't want them to go that direction. That's number one. So that's the method of our build play from midfield forward. Just lumping it in every now and then. Like we hit an awful lot of Route 1 deliveries down on top of, Hugh Lawler and these lads. And, we didn't get an awful lot changed in probably the last 5 or 6 minutes. Whereas I want to see us going more direct route with the legs as opposed to the ball. Number two then is our defensive setup. If we can marshal the Tipperary forwards in terms of their movement. So what will happen is they'll create confusion. They'll create a bit of pandemonium with lads showing up in different spaces. If we can get our game plan right, whereby we either set up in such a way that we're defending both space and mid at the same time, or we're tagging lads and we don't open up gaps for others, that's going to involve some midfield help, then I'll be content. So, because all that will lead to A, scoring more, and B, our concession rate coming down, because unfortunately our concession rate in Kilkenny was too high. We can't have a situation whereby we repeat the type of goal we let in, because truthfully speaking, probably the 4 goals you got last week, Murph, were strikingly similar. They were strikingly similar, where it was Route 1. I always take great confidence in as a goalkeeper if a team comes at us, scores a goal, but doesn't opens up. If they get a break from a free or 65 or whatever, that happens in the nature of sport. But if a team runs through us and opens up with a couple of split passes, I get worried, because then our defensive structure is not right. And for it to happen 4 times in key moments in both halves, that's a concern for me. So I'd certainly be hoping that was a focal point for them to look at this week in terms of getting improvement. And I think it will be, to be honest. I think now we'll see a more aggressive defence. Like, if you look at the goals last week, there was some, and I'll say it, there was some jogging back to the goals. There was kind of a nonchalant kind of approach to it. Whereas when you look at, as I said, Limerick and Clare, the way the Limerick boys went back, it was just life or death kind of stuff. They were going back as hard as they could and making sure that net wasn't rattled. That didn't exactly happen for Galway last weekend. So that's what I'm hoping to see. If we have a defensive aggression, a good setup that will nullify the Tipperary movement, I think we're in a very, very good position. And I want to see us. I'm telling you here now, the Galway lads they'll have bottle. They'll have a fight in them. And I want to see when the fight's thrown at Tipperary, what will they do? When it's thrown at them, what will this team do?
I don't know, Murph, if Seamus Callanan is going to start. He was in around kind of the bare around the square position at the weekend just gone by. Got his 40th championship goal from play, which is a remarkable record for all 40 of them to come from open play. That's a huge record, even taking into account the additional games that we have right now.
Yeah.
How difficult was Callanan to play against?
Yeah, he was extremely difficult. I think particularly Callanan was one of the players that towards the end of his career, he really, I say towards the end of his career, he's still playing, but like you have some players who show really well when they're 19, 20, 21. You go, these lads are going to be absolutely incredible. And then maybe don't perform, let's say, after 25. They kind of just never hit the peaks that you think they're going to hit. But I remember when I started playing, like Callanan would have played in 2009. I wasn't playing in 2009. I wasn't on the bench or anything. And then by the time I came in 2011, Callanan was kind of a player mostly at that time and came off the bench at different times. Like, he started some games and he came off the bench, but he wasn't the Seamus Callanan that you would have seen after, let's say, 2014 onwards. You know, that was this absolutely incredible hurler. But he's such a rangy player, and he's pacey, you know. And I think the big game we would have seen was 2014, himself and JJ, and the battle that both of them had. And the fact that his pace, when they created space in front of Seamus, to go and run into that wing forward position, because that's what he was doing. He was starting at full forward and breaking out into the wing forward position or in and around that. They'd land ball out to him, and he was very hard. He was very hard to get a hold of there. Another thing with Seamus Callanan, which I'd say more so than other forwards I would have played against, was when you got the ball, he was a great man to tackle. Like, if you got the ball at corner back, he was a great man to use his size and actually hit you. It's not something I don't think the neutral person looking in at Seamus Callanan thinks that's something he's good at. But I remember, like, even 2019 now, when I was getting the ball, 2 or 3 times I got the ball in the first half, it was him that was tackling me, and he'd just come running out. We weren't marking each other, but he'd come out and he'd tackle. Like, that's the kind of thankless stuff that you want your forwards to do. Seamus Callanan, whenever he finishes, will be remembered for his 40+ goals that he scored from play, all the great points he scored. But he's a savage man to work, savage man to tackle. One of these forwards, like Peter Casey, that you see running out from the full forward position, chasing lads to try and get a hook, and restarts the attack all over again. And those were the qualities that I remember from him. And again, similar to the likes of Johnny Glynn, Seamus was always a player whereby after the game, like, you shake hands, whether he won, whether you won, you shake hands afterwards, and there was always a kind of a laugh, nearly that great battle kind of, and the best of luck. But look, he's one of these boys that if you're being very honest, you wanted to mark him because you want to mark the best players. You want to mark Joe Canning, you want to mark Patrick Horgan, because it's nearly a reflection that you were going well as well. And so Seamus Callanan was one of these players, but at the same time, like an absolute handful. But like he's capable. He's absolutely capable. Will he start at the weekend? Hard to know, being very honest. You know, we can wax lyrical as well, but like Tipperary will cut the cloth to measure and they'll start who they need to start. You know, there'll be no romance in this. It'll be a case of whoever the personnel and Bonner could start the weekend. You know, they may think that, do you know what we need at full forward? We need a fella coming out, darting, winning the ball, breaking a few balls. So it's very hard to know, but like he's been brilliant for them, and it's gas even seeing him at the weekend, still having that hunger to go for goal when he gets the ball, wanting to hit the back of the net. So look, obviously, it goes without saying, just a top class player for Tipperary.
Yeah, Tipp scored a quite outrageous 7:31 from play at the weekend. So Jason Ford was on the freeze and on the 65s, but they got 12 different scores from play during it. So it's clear, look, they've got stacked attacking options coming into this game, Skehill. But is there an argument for having Callanan in around the square as someone to cause problems for Galway at the weekend, or is he better deployed maybe coming off the bench like he did a couple of times in the Munster Championship?
I just find it hard to see how he wouldn't start him. I know he's had his injury troubles in years of late, but like he always produces something, and like he takes ferocious mind, and regardless of age, mileage, you know, where you think his performance levels are at. I think if you throw him in there on top of Gareth McInerney, you're looking for a titanic battle. Then you can put the ball long, you can move the ball low. You've got unlimited options, should I say? So yeah, I'd start him personally if he was my player. Now Liam Cahill obviously has seen an awful lot more on him. He's got a game plan centered on certain personnel. Might start him, might put him in as an impact sub, and the game might just warrant that. You could have 55 minutes. Lads we saw how the game petered out in Croke Park. Lads are out on their feet. Could be a warm day, and you could have 55 minutes, and then you bring on Seamus Callanan. What a guy to bring on! You know what I mean? What a guy to bring on! And so like that could be. It could be a number of things. It could be a crowd lifter. It could probably get some more energy into your team when you see a lad of his caliber coming on. So there's pros and cons to both options. But personally speaking, like I would always have someone like him of his caliber starting. And again, like with Daithí Burke, we've seen how influential he's been at 6. So just again a little bolter out there. Just Bonner start at 11. You know, to put in Bonner and say, put the lefty on him. Let's have a battle between the two. That's a possibility too, because they've had good battles in the past, the two of them. So it's a hard one to know. Will that's why I suppose it's such. Obviously, the match itself is an intriguing fixture, but team selection, like Galway have loads of options too in terms of the forwards. Who goes where? I couldn't tell you at this moment in time the 6 forwards in Galway. Not that I would. I'm just saying. I wouldn't. If we're offline and have to guess, I actually can't guess right now. I don't think we'd see the same forward line this week that we saw last week.
Well, I tell you boys wouldn't tell me anyway, because we're having a conversation in the Croke Park Hotel before the Leinster final, and Steph and Aidan Hart were sitting there. And I was just having a conversation about, Adrian Mullen's injured, sure, it's terrible, isn't it, and all this. And I said, yes, Cathal Mannion's 21. They'll surely start him, will they? Like, you know, instead of a lad with a hamstring injury, you'd rather start him than just a bit of conversation. 2 boys as if I never even spoke to them. They just stayed looking at the oak, and they were like, "Geez, warm enough today. The queue is big for the bar, isn't it?" I was like, "Jesus Christ, lads! Like, you know, do you ever just give it up? Do you ever relax?" Like, you know?
See, if I was on my own or Hart's on my own, we tell you.
Two, just kind of rubbed your nose, just kind of had a look at this, yeah, and don't answer him. As if you had this unspoken language, don't answer.
If I was on my own, I'd tell you. But what happened if I told you, Hart turned to me then and said, "What are you telling that for?"
Yeah, you're telling me. Fair enough, yeah.
I'd say the same thing to him. If he said it to you, I'd say, "Hey, shh, stop! Don't be the way that."
I'd just take up the question with Owen Lynch. I'd turn right to me and go, "Jesus Christ! Like the boys are wicked suspicious here." Tough crowd.
What are your predictions then, lads? I'll give you first shout, Murph, because I have a feeling Skehill might just go for Galway here. So who are you picking? Tipp or Galway 6:15 on Saturday?
I'll be honest, I'm going to go with Tipperary on form of what I can see. But one point I was thinking was, Skehill, stop rubbing your eyes, will you? Like, it's punditry. You're in this game long enough. Like, you get so angry when people don't say Galway.
No, like, but you said on form, right? They were dog shite against Waterford.
They
were. And then they
racked up the largest score in quarter-final history 2 days ago. Yeah. All right. Let me explain. Right, can you mute him, or is he?
I enjoy his interactions. Go on.
I'm too busy over here nailing my colours to the match.
No, actually, one point before I say about Tipp and Galway, in terms of prediction. But even though I said Tipp, the one thing with Galway, I know this might be thinking too far ahead, or I might be maybe trying to be too positive with Galway. There's part of me that goes, if Galway wanted to go and win All-Ireland, winning that game last weekend, would it have rectified any of the problems Galway had, if they currently have? Like, they were 8 points down in the game against Kilkenny. You could come away from that game after winning it saying, geez, we're great, we're on the right track. or maybe does a kick in the arse maybe stand to you a bit more if you're going to an All-Ireland final? Because if Galway go and win this game at the weekend, they're back into an All-Ireland semi-final, but they've now beaten a team who have drawn with Limerick this year, and Galway go to face Limerick then, having went down to the Gaelic Grounds, beaten a Tipperary team, a serious Tipperary team, and now they have something that they wouldn't have had if they just won the Leinster final. They have a kick in the arse and they have a response. So like I know a team sometimes can be maybe a bit too positive and look into things, but I genuinely think that if Galway are to go and win the All-Ireland, I don't think they were winning the All-Ireland having won the Leinster final last weekend the way the game was played. Like if they went out and they blew Kilkenny off the pitch, fantastic. That's better position. But they're down by 8 points. They have things to work on. They let in 4 goals where basically the team just ran at them. They have things to work on. If they go and beat Tipperary, I think that's a far better position to go into an All-Ireland semi-final in than having won the Leinster final, like the way they played the game. But in this, at the moment, it is finely balanced. But from what I've seen with how clinical Tipperary have been, and I'm going back as far as the league here, where Tipperary have went out and performed for Tipperary, not based off emotion or anything. They seem Liam Cahill has this great ability of getting a team to think very clearly, getting to be very clinical and go out and, lads, we're racking up a score here, we're going to win for us. And when they've needed to be emotional, they've dialed that up. You know, when they played Limerick, when they played Cork, particularly the Cork game, there's savage emotion in that, and they were hitting lads, and they were able to dial up and down the emotion as they needed it. And I just see Tipperary at the moment that maybe they're just showing that little bit more. Maybe there's just a small bit of a chink in Galway's armour from what we've seen in the Leinster final and against Dublin. That's all that I'm referencing at the moment. But I fully believe that Galway can absolutely go and win this game. They can go, and they're the team that could go and beat Tipperary. And like I said, if they do go and beat Tipp, I fully believe they're in a better position to go win All-Ireland than they would have been if they won the Leinster final. It'd be all positive and they'd be off for 4 weeks. Brilliant. But they've learned a lot more getting to a semi-final by beating Tipperary than having went out and bet Kilkenny. But look, at the moment, I'm going to lean towards, and Skehill, this isn't easy for me as a Kilkenny man to say leaning towards Tipperary, but I'm leaning towards Tipperary at the moment, okay? Now you can predict Galway.
For some reason, I just think that your wife was there with a shotgun pointing at you.
Absolutely not. Put it down. No. Like, in fairness now, Aideen, like, she's been out in Kilkenny long enough now. There's, like, yeah, she has time for Kilkenny as well. So, but I don't know. I didn't ask her yet. She's nearly going to have a side project on this pod if we include her too much now. Like, we need... Like, you know, your wife will have to come into this. Grace will have to come into this now as well, like, you know, so. But I'm going to go with Tipperary anyway, for now.
No, but in fairness, everything you said, like, if I was just to extract the Galway part of me, there's logic in what you said. You know, and I'm very much evidence-based, logic approach. I agree with everything you said. If we won the Leinster final, producing a good performance and winning by 6 points, I'd say we're on a good run here. Yeah. But the way we played in the Leinster final, which is kind of sort of topsy-turvy, some excellent stuff, some poor stuff, and if we came through that, you'd say, no, we're on a good roll. I agree with you. It would probably hide over the cracks, and some of the cracks could be actually bigger than one would think. So I am content right now. If you asked me from 7 days ago, I was going to rip the wall down, you know. But alas, here I am, cool, calm and collected, trying to approach this and say, yeah, we're going to win. We're going to beat Tipp. We're going to beat Tipp. I just think our forwards, for forwards get clicking, and it's a big if we get clicking at all, like we can take them down. But like that, I say that on one side of my mouth. The other side of my mouth, I'm saying we have to stop their forwards. But again, that's what I like. I like being in a position here whereby we're talking about 2 top level teams and we're trying to split hairs. Very, very fine margins. We wouldn't want a situation whereby we've just discussed 20 minutes ago about Clare going to come through Dublin and there's no real excitement, there's no buzz. The fixture line is actually capturing the imagination of any neutral, whereas this one I think will.
Yeah.
No, I'd agree. Colm Cunningham in context, well, how can Offaly get over the hammering at the weekend? I think how to get over it is go back and try and win the Joe McDonagh next year. It's as simple as that.
You know my phrase I just said, right? I use a lot. Just get on with it. Get on with it. Don't mind looking back. Just get on with it. Like, just get stronger, get faster, get better. That's it. Just get on with it.
Yeah.
And don't listen to
look, I saw a few Offaly fans who were frustrated online, particularly after the way the last few weeks have gone, because, it was understandably quite a bit of excitement, and I saw some people even saying, you know, the self-congratulations has been a bit too much from Offaly people who went out and lost the finals. The first thing I said to you guys, remember when we were talking about them being in the finals, I said nothing's won yet. Like, they've got 2 huge games coming up, and you know, it didn't happen for them in the 2 finals. Particularly the Joe McDonagh was a very difficult one to take because of the nature of the very, very late defeat that they took. But all Offaly can do now at this stage is to try and get as many of those under-20s that they have from the team this year that are still around, get them more experience and try and go on another run in the All-Ireland under-20s. Get guys like Mitchell and Burke who've already got into the senior panel. Get one or two more of them. Hopefully, touch wood, Oisín Kelly is back fit for next year. And give the Joe McDonagh a right good assault, because it's going to be very, very difficult. But Kerry, especially with Laois coming down, I think Laois will get their house in order next year. I think Laois will probably be the team to beat in the Joe McDonagh Championship next year. That's all Offaly can do. At least they're in Division 1B this time as opposed to in Division 1A. Because the last time they went up, it was Limerick, Galway, Clare, a couple of hammerings taken along the way. It was very dispiriting. I don't see any reason why Offaly can't give good games to Antrim and to Dublin next season and prep themselves for the championship. I think this Tipperary game will be long forgotten, and I think everyone knew going into that Tipperary game that Tipp were going to win by a distance, maybe not quite the 34 points they played out to be. Before we go, Skell, you did a bit of research, and I wouldn't want the research to go to waste before we leave. And I didn't want you to tell me before we come on air what this was about. You just said you were looking into Gaelic football at the weekend, so I'm intrigued as to where this is going to go.
Don't you just pull the string and it gets longer and longer and longer?
The notebook gets fuller and fuller.
This is how it started. I've notes on my page here, and I don't even know which way I'm going to structure this, lads. I have the clue.
You haven't even indicated what this is about yet. So, I mean,
it was suppose. Now, I didn't hear John Logue's comments until today, right? But I had this started probably on Friday. Just wondering, just being inquisitive as to how many games are in hurling, because we spoke about 7 games being left. I was rightly corrected last week. 7 games being left. We've obviously now got 5. So in total, let's say when you take the Leinster Championship, Munster Championship, and all the knockout phases, the hurling championship would have 33 games total. So that's all our senior games. And I'm talking about Liam Cahill only. So please excuse me. I'm not talking about the other divisions. And when I take football, right, and I just take the group stages of the Sam Maguire group stages that have just finished, and go all the way to knockout, it's 35 games. So when I take out the 4 provinces of football, I have more games in the football championship than in hurling. And I was saying this just doesn't sound right. Now, I understand football, whether the team is ranked 17, 18, 19, and they play a team ranked 19, 21, they can be competitive. That's why the group games at the minute in the football has been ultra competitive, because teams have been at the same standard to a degree. So with hurling, we've got a much bigger proposition, a much bigger opposition, you could say. So then I listened to Donald's comments, and he said the GAA has failed hurling, etc. And sometimes when he speaks, I understand what he's trying to say, but sometimes his delivery comes across odd, or it gets skewed a bit by he's paraphrasing or taking token phrases. But I get what he's saying, but I don't think the GAA has failed hurling. I just think the GAA have a huge issue. If I was to promote hurling right now, the only way I can physically see it at the minute is to tinker with the Munster and Leinster championships. But it doesn't actually fix anything. It fixes nothing. That might get me more games on television. It might close the margin on some of the games. But that's it. I actually don't do anything to improve the longevity of the game or get it into the lower divisions. So then I started looking at a statement Donald made in years previous about could we get a provincial team like an Ulster? And I started looking into Kerry football and Cork hurling, where they come divisional. And I just started going down a rabbit hole as to where do I stop from here, and how many people lose in the game if you opened up an Ulster team. So Will, you've asked me what have I looked into. I don't actually know, right? I don't actually know. Overall, I'm saying is the games we see on hurling, right, is probably the most amount of games we can get, and the best product we have at the minute. How that improves the game going forward, I don't think it actually improves it. But if we get more exposure, like Donald says, and wants more games on television, I don't think it improves the game that much more. Yes, it might get some younger players playing, but it won't get more clubs. It won't get more individuals playing in football clubs or football counties. So I'm not sure how to go. It goes back to what we said weeks ago. Major investment in not alone the tier 2, but tier 3 and tier 4 counties. And that's a 15-year plan, 20 years.
If people listen to us right now in audio form, you'll have to do a quick search for this either in the OTBGA podcast stream, or you'll find it on the YouTube if you want to watch it, which is Martin Fogarty was on Off the Ball last month, I'm going to say. It was probably the middle of the month. I'll put in the YouTube version, I'll put it in the comments underneath as an Off the Ball comment. But he spoke about this and just explained how, on the one hand, it's incredibly simple. On the other hand, it's incredibly complex to try and grow hurling outside of what he called the traditional areas. And he was almost calling it the wilderness, where he was trying to promote hurling when he was the National Hurling Director. Now, COVID kicked in and his tenure came to an end, and there's been nobody appointed to succeed him. So I would think the first thing that needs to happen, if the GAA feel that is the right way to go, to have a national coordinator, they need to appoint another one. But he was making the point that a lot of what he was setting up was just a way to try and get matches between clubs in areas where there aren't other clubs to play against. And he was saying that was nearly the biggest challenge that he had. So you would go into areas in Connacht and areas in Ulster, and there wasn't a match to be had against a team roughly your level within an hour of where you were. You had some strong clubs here and there in Roscommon and in Sligo, but generally when you went a little bit further north particularly, unless you were in Derry, Antrim or Down, there were a lot of clubs who just couldn't get a match against each other. And he was trying to find a way of setting up leagues so that teams could play against each other. And he said the only way you can actually really improve, and I think that the experience of teams going into the Kilkenny Championships, whether they be from Laois, Carlow or Kildare in recent years, to use your phrase, Skehill, iron sharpens iron. It was an opportunity to play maybe against a better level and to get a consistent level of games for your club hurler to try and improve. Like ultimately, I think in the GAA, we often think about a top-down perspective where our only interest is how do we make the Liam McCarthy counties better and get them closer to each other, as opposed to if you want to build from the ground up, what you need to do is have a vibrant club scene and have the clubs producing the best hurlers that you can possibly produce, which will therefore encourage the game to actually grow. Exactly. And some of the opposition that Martin Fogarty said that he faced was a very simple one, which was he would go into an area where there were rival clubs playing football against each other, so they didn't particularly want to join up maybe to create a hurling club, or they felt that resources would be dragged in a certain direction if hurling was to happen. So therefore, this might weaken our football team, and football is our main focus. So he was saying that maybe that's the investment that the GAA have to make, which is providing equipment or providing coaching or providing what's required to actually get hurling going in the ground in these areas. I think it's a far more complex thing than what happens with the Leinster group stage or the Munster group stage, Murph. Like that's its own issue, but it's not going to grow. It's not going to grow hurling in Monaghan, or it's not going to grow hurling in Leitrim.
No, like restructuring the senior level of hurling with your Waterfords, Kilkennys, Clares, whatever, Offaly's, doesn't do anything for the player who's up in Monaghan who can't play too many competitive games but loves to play hurling. That doesn't do anything for the 16-year-old up there. Like, we're talking from that point of view in terms of making it more appealing to the neutral. But I spoke to Martin Fogarty about this. I'm on a committee with him, and generally as well, just from meeting him and chatting to him, he would have explained, because I'd be asking him, like, what's it like, because Martin used to go off there and he'd be gone for 2 or 3 days because he'd be gone up to Antrim or Tyrone or Donegal or Sligo or wherever. And I suppose it was an eye-opener for him as well, having come from the saturation of Kilkenny to going up there. And like that, things that you just don't think about, where, we're saying, we have to make it more appealing to these people. But how is appealing when you have to drive 2 hours to your next nearest club? Like, if you're in the far end of, I don't know where, let's say Donegal or wherever, but you have a savage journey to make, and there isn't that pool of teams to actually go and competitive play an underage game. And like that as well, where you have, like, Kilkenny's criticised for, maybe not promoting football, but we have 28 football clubs in Kilkenny that played football right up until, recently. Whereas if you go up to a few counties up there, you'd have to pool counties together to get 28 juvenile clubs, 28 minor teams, club teams. It's far more stark in certain areas than people realise. And exactly like I said, it's the old thing of, a rising tide lifts all ships. It's from the ground up. It's bringing it in at such a level whereby it's not about the calibre of what you're doing, but it's just becoming part of a culture within a county whereby we actually have quite a few people who pick up a hurl here, even through the likes of social hurling, and bringing people in the door that way. It's not about getting people to perform, or teams or counties to perform all to the level of Tipperary and Limerick and all this. It's about having your kids walking down the town with a hurl in their hand because they go playing hurling with their friends. That's the challenge. Like, and, in Kilkenny, we've been doing certain things to say, right, maybe we need to do things with restructuring development squads and different things. But one of the points that we, I suppose, take a lot of solace in is the fact that, you walk down the main street here in Kilkenny, and there's young fellas with a hurling the ball in their hand with a school bag over their back. That's the level you're looking to try and get to. So it's when you get it into the culture within the county whereby, first of all, it's getting by the physical structures of having clubs close enough to you where you can get regular games over the season and you actually feel part of a community, that there's a bigger kind of structure here. There's a bigger web of clubs that you can perform with, even if it's across a county boundary, and getting to the stage where young players identify as hurlers, that say, I play hurling, I play football as well. Absolutely, I play both, but there's an opportunity for me to go and play hurling if I want to. So it's a huge challenge, but it won't happen at restructuring, Kilkenny playing Waterford next year in the Champions League type format. That's not the things that are going to restructure hurling up there. It'll come from the very grassroots level. And again, I hold my hands up and saying it, like, the GAA is making strides, and Nicky Brennan has highlighted these different things at different times, that they are making strides, and you can't just bash the GAA overhead with it. It's not as simple as certain things. And I do believe a starting point is obviously absolutely providing funding. and enormous levels of funding, but that has to come with a structure. You can't just throw money at it blindly and think that the money is going to sort these things. There's so many things, and look, this is a decade-long project, 20 years or 10, 20 years you're talking, So look, it's a conversation we'll continue to have, but the idea to think that it's just going to be a one solution fixes all, it's not. There's a lot of things we need to do to bring so many more counties into the fray here.
Just before we finish up, I want to tell you about our competition winner as well. Hurling, of course, is anyone's game. Off the Ball have teamed up with the Senior Hurling Championship sponsors Bord Gáis Energy. We're uncovering stories highlighting the positive impact that hurling is having on people's lives. This week's competition winner, which is hosted by our good friends Bord Gáis Energy, is Emma Cooper from County Clare. Emma and her brothers play for the local club Broadford, and they've written in about their father Martin, originally from London, but he's become a big part of the club, promoting Broadford on social media and with his match action photography from their games as well. So congrats to the Cooper family. They're going to be getting a prize from Bord Gáis Energy. I promise, because I keep on getting DMs about this, I will have news in the next few days about our live show. I'm just waiting for the tickets to go live at this stage. It's all agreed. It's all planned. Joe Canning's the first guest. The two lads are going to be there. It is going to be All-Ireland final week. I don't mean to make it sound like a tease again, but I have to just wait until the tickets page is live before I can promote this. I'm sure myself and the two lads will be hawking tickets for probably the next 3 weeks before we get ready for All-Ireland final week for our big live road show. So looking forward to that, but we will have details later in the week. We'll be back with the guys at the weekend. I'm sure we're all going to be watching on Saturday. Are we all going to the Gaelic Grounds on Saturday, lads?
Yeah.
Do you know?
You're going? Yeah. Murph's going to be watching on TV?
I'll see. I'll see what I watch it from the comfort of my living room. I'll see. I'm half thinking of going down just for the two games, but we'll see. That might determine whether we do a live show or not this weekend. Maybe we could do Sunday though. Go on, Skehill. You were about to cut across there. Sorry.
Can you get us up in the high level seats up top there, me and you?
That's what we want now. Yeah.
I'm sure we could get them. Yeah. It's Gaelic Grounds has got a fairly wide crow's nest, I think, as they call it. It's a very high up press box as well. It's a nice setup now. I'll see what I can do. Put it that way.
You do that.
Skehill, if I don't see you beside JP McManus and Bill Murray now the weekend, I'll be snapping.
Well, normally I'd say I'd fit right in, but I don't think a farmer from East Galway would fit in with JP and Bill Murray.
Well, was this week last year that Bill Murray went to, I think, his first hurling game. So
could be Groundhog Day.
Could well be back again. Right. Lads, we'll chat a bit closer to the weekend. We'll release the details about what we're doing about the show. I think maybe we might do Sunday next week, though, off the back of the quarterfinals. I'm not putting pressure on you again, Skehill, to be back in time because I don't want you flying through the toll bridge again on Saturday to do a live show at 9 o'clock or something like that.
Saturday I might have to actually take JP's chopper. Sunday we've got league final in the evenings. I'm not sure it is. I don't know how things will pan out. I might have to write a sick note.
Look, well, there you go. We'll be in touch between now and then anyway. Lads, it's been a pleasure. Thanks a million.
Sound lads. Good
luck.
OTB's The Hurling Pod.
With Bord Gáis Energy.
Hurling. It's